And often irrational, longtime Portland radio vet, Chad Dewing.
3.3 left. 117, 116 Lakers. Williams to Giddey over the midcourt line. Giddey goes. Midcourt. Oh! It's good! It's good! It's good! Bulls win! Bulls win! Bulls win!
3 seconds left. Wagner driving right. Behind his back. Launches a 20-footer for the tie. No! It's over! Texas Tech has won! Texas Tech is going to the Elite Eight! The Red Raiders back from the dead! The top seed Florida Gators on their way to the Elite Eight. A dominating second-half performance for the guys from Gainesville. And the clock will run out. Florida 87, Maryland 71. The Gators are moving on to the Elite Eight.
Rebound for Alabama, and this one is over. A record-setting, stunning night for the Crimson Tide. They sink an NCAA tournament record, 25 three-pointers, and they blow out BYU 113-88 for the second year in a row. Alabama's on the way to the Elite Eight, and that's going to do it. The Duke Blue Devils survive and advance. They reach the Elite Eight for the 25th time in school history. Finally surviving a gritty Arizona team, 100-93 here in Newark tonight, behind another gorgeous performance from Cooper Flagg.
Strap in. The Rip City Drive with Chad Dewing starts now.
I do have an additional highlight to add to that. Take a listen.
High fly ball, left field. Curio back, track, wall. See ya! A grand slam for Aaron Judge, and the Yankees are pouring it on.
Yeah, the man, the myth, the legend, Aaron Judge is on one today. Right now, the Yankees, bottom of the eighth in New York, on top of the Milwaukee Brewers by a score of 20-7. It's like a football score. Aaron Judge with a couple of touchdowns passing. The Yankees on top of the Brewers 20-7. Right now, Judge, 5 at-bats, 4 hits, 4 runs, 8 RBIs, and 3 homers. And he just missed his 4th homer of the day. It's unbelievable. Man, I really want to see him get to 4. So I looked it up. I remember Mark Whitten when he had 4 homers in the game back in like 93. But there's only a select few that have hit 4 home runs in a game. Bobby Lowe back in 1894. Ed Delonte back in 1896. Lou Gehrig in 32. Chuck Klein in 36. Pat Seary back in 48. Gil Hodges in 50. Joe Adcock, interesting name, 1954. Rocky Colavito back in 59. Willie Mays, legend, 61. Mike Schmidt had 4 in 76. He was probably booed by Philly fans in the process. Bob Horner in 86. Mark Whitten with the Cards in 93. Mike Cameron in 02. Sean Green in 02. Carlos Delgado in 03. So you had 1, 2, 3 guys within a 1-year span back in the early 2000s. I wonder what contributed to that. Josh Hamilton in 2012. Scooter Gannett in 2017, and also J.D. Martinez in 2017. You know, I was mentioning yesterday on the show, and by the way, good morning or good afternoon or whatever the heck time it is. All the days are the same to me right now. So I was mentioning yesterday on the Rip City Drive that someone had reached out to me, a Dodger fan, and she was really upset because the Yankees manager, Aaron Boone, had said that he believes Aaron Judge is the best player in baseball. And the only person that would get upset with those comments would be a Dodger fan because of Shohei Ohtani. And then you see Judge come out today, so I text that Dodger fan back. I said, you know what? He might be right. But I love Aaron Judge. He's one of those guys. There are certain athletes that I've come across in my lifetime that they're not just human or they don't appear to be human, but they're like larger-than-life characters, similar to Paul Bunyan. And you remember Paul Bunyan, he was super strong. He would eat flapjacks, and his cast iron skillets that they cooked his flapjack in were so big that he had little, like, dwarfs that would use pieces of bacon on their feet like ice skates to grease up the pan. It was so big, right? Like mythological figures. And wasn't it Paul Bunyan that ate popcorn for his thanking food too? I think I remember reading that in a book one time, which is awesome because I love popcorn. Well, anyways, Aaron Judge is awesome. I love him. I think he is like the perfect player to take over and be the captain of the Yankees after Derek Jeter. And he's a cool guy. But he's got like the superhuman strength, right? Where the bat, it's like he's holding a toothpick. And I've held a Major League bat before. They're not exactly light, you know what I mean? It's a heavy piece of lumber, but he holds it like a toothpick and just swings that thing like a bad boy. He is a bad boy. So Aaron Judge on one today with 3 homers, nearly got 4, which would have put him in the elite club of the 18 players who have done it. So there you go. That's what's going on a Saturday. And by the way, happy Saturday to you. I feel like this is like back in the beginning days of my radio genesis. Saturday shows were awesome back in the day because it was a training ground for youngsters who had no business being on the radio during the week to develop your chops, get some experience, and throughout the years, I had a chance to work with some cool people. Gavin Dawson and I did Saturday shows together. I got a start on Saturdays on KVAN 1550. I did Saturdays for years at 95.5 The Game, including, Ducks Game Day. So it's kind of weird to be on the radio on a Saturday, but I'm here at Spirit Mountain Casino, your place to bet on college sports for the Elite Eight. And we've got the games set up today and tomorrow, and the Final Four is going to be determined. Last night, the action how it went down. Number 1 seed Auburn topped Michigan 78-65 in the South. The 1 seed Houston survived against Purdue 62-60 in the Midwest. The 2 seed Michigan State in a thriller against Ole Miss. Spartans get the win 73-70. And then in the Midwest, the 2 seed Tennessee took out Kentucky 78-65, setting up today's matchups in the Elite Eight today and tomorrow. We have 2 games. First one will be at 3:09 on TBS and True TV with the 3 seed Texas Tech taking on the 1 seed Florida in the Elite Eight in the West. And then in the East, it'll be the 1 seed Duke against the 2 seed Alabama. Duke, of course, they're young. They've got Cooper Flagg, and they've been terrific, well-coached, have executed well, and played great basketball all year with a record of 34-3. Alabama is one of the more potent teams in the tournament. They've had a great season, and they're coming off a game in which they hit 25 threes, which is a tournament record. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this game that will tip off at 5:49 with Bama and Duke, maybe a couple of fan bases that the majority of us dislike, but that's a big-time basketball game right there. And I love what I saw from Duke in the game against Arizona. They really executed well down the stretch against Desert Scrub and got the job done. And I thought Cooper Flagg was terrific. His decision-making, his anticipatory passing, you could just tell that he was sacked up. He was nutted up and ready to go. It was very impressive. So we got some good basketball games today coming up on the show. I'm going to be with you for the next 3 hours. I've got a full day of activity down here at Spirit Mountain Casino. I'm going to go special Saturday edition of the Rip City Drive going from 1 up until 4. And then after that, I'll go right into my Bob Barker routine with the final Saturday here in March for Pot of Gold. And there'll be drawings down here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is get your tail on down here to Spirit Mountain Casino. And we got basketball, great place to hang out in the sports book. And I'm not lying. And the people who have finally come down and taken my word for it are like, dude, you weren't lying. I'm like, no, it's great down here. The sports book, I'm looking at cushy chairs all in front of me. They've got great seating, great setup. They got the video wall behind me so you can kick back and watch all the sports action. It's great for the tournament. It's great for NFL Sundays. It's great for college football Saturdays. They've got the counter here with a lot of great helpful people where you can get your bets in and be able to get your action in on the tournament. They've got the Top Golf Suite, which is brand new, right next to me to my left. So if you want to play some golf during the games, they've got screens in the Top Golf Suite where you can also watch the games. 10 Barrel Brewing, Stadium Bar, everything you need is right here. And the best part is you can sneak out and pretend like you're being productive and then get out of your honey-do list and come down here and watch basketball. I know how this stuff goes. You don't want to be doing stuff around the house that's going to take up your time and interfere with your sports viewing. So you've got to get creative and go on a little road trip down to Spirit Mountain Casino. That's how you got to do it, man. Because if you hang around the house, eventually you'll get put to work. I've seen this happen with my dad over the years, right? You hang around the house, and before you know it, mom is on your ass, and you're outside doing something you would rather not be doing so you could be watching basketball. But that's what we got going on today. Justin Bollinger, the sportsbook manager, is going to join me coming up here at 1:20. And then Michael Holton, former Trailblazer and current television and radio analyst for the team, is going to join me at 3 o'clock. Michael Holton, in case you didn't know, played big boy basketball at UCLA and barely missed out on a national championship. Played in the Final Four. They lost to Louisville, so I want to talk with him about his tournament experience, and we'll also get his take on where the Trailblazers are at with 8 games to go in the season. So that's kind of the plan today, but, all these days are running together. I think I mentioned this before. I'm in the middle of like 41 consecutive days of work. No break, no off days, no nothing. I'm just grinding. It's just the way the schedule played out between Blazer games, the regular show, and the work down here at Spirit Mountain Casino, and whatever that is. My last day off was on the 1st of March, which was Saturday, and then we progress all the way up into April. April 12th is my next day off. And that's the day before the Trailblazers season finale. This is just the time of the year. Like if I were a tax guy, this is like my busy time of the year right now. A lot of different events coming off of football season into basketball, Trailblazer games because of the NBA schedule. They just load up on games, for the final stretch run. It's pretty insane. But the Blazers are going to be playing tomorrow. They're going to be in New York to take on the Knicks, and I'm looking forward to that game. The Knicks and Blazers, that first game at Moda Center a couple of weeks ago was, I think, probably the best game of the year on the Blazers' schedule. It was wildly entertaining, and Mikal Bridges hit a 3 at the buzzer to win the game in overtime. But what we've seen over the last couple of months of the season is all the growth from the young guys, Scoot, Shaden, Klingon, Tamani, and Denny. What I want to see from them now, after having some of the wind taken out of their sails against Sacramento a couple of nights ago, I want to see how they respond to this situation. Can they bounce back and scratch out some wins on the road? Could they upset the Knicks? How are they going to respond? Will their intensity level be there? Because it wasn't against Sacramento. And I think for a young team, as you're learning how to win and learning how to play together and, paying attention to the details that Coach Phillips has talked about in terms of what you need to be able to win games, I want to see if they can do that and not lose focus with 8 games to go. And as I mentioned yesterday, the best part about this year, the way it's played out, is, one, the development has been there, especially with Scoot and Shaden, so we're seeing flashes. Denny and Tamani are terrific, and Donovan Klingon obviously was a find. But the cool part is that they're playing meaningful basketball games here on March 29th, getting ready for the Knicks on March 30th, all the way throughout the year. So it hasn't been a tank season. We've seen player development, and now these guys are getting a chance to play meaningful games in a push for the play-in. And that's very good for development. So I'm excited about that. And I think you should be excited about that too. So that's the plan. Justin Bollinger is coming up in a few minutes, and then we're going to talk with Michael Holton, and I'll hang out with you like old school Saturday show style here on the radio. Michael Shacker is with me. And if you want to jump on board, if you're out there bumping around, you got nothing going on, I would love to hear from you. 503-248-0620 is the telephone number. Do you think Aaron Judge is a mythical figure like Paul Bunyan, like I do? 3 homers today, the Yankees. Last check. Let's see what the Yankees are doing right now. 20 runs on the board. 20-9 lead on the Brewers, top of the 9th in New York. All right, Justin Bollinger, sportsbook manager at Spirit Mountain Casino, is coming up next. We'll break down the Elite 8 here on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, the more I talk to him, the more I realize we have in common. Justin Ballinger, sportsbook manager here at Spirit Mountain Casino. Thank you for having me down again today, my friend.
Thank you for coming down once again.
You were nice enough because last night I was like, hey, can I just leave this equipment here? So you let me store it in the closet because I knew it was going to be raining this morning. And then I would have been a soaked, like a little rat walking into the
Right.
casino. So you took care of me. I appreciate that.
No problem.
So you went to Gonzaga, and you and your wife love the Northwest, but you grew up in Orange County. And it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, but like Kobe's your favorite basketball player, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
See, I'm not a Laker fan because I've lived out here for so long, but like I love Kobe. Like he is right up there at the top, and I think it's because he and I were similar in age, but I got to watch him literally from day one all the way throughout his entire career, and I just appreciated his competitiveness. And I had never seen a player so identical to Michael Jordan. Like I never thought I would see that, and yet Kobe imitated, copied, and did everything. And so when I watched Kobe sometimes, he moved and talked and did things like MJ, and I was like, whoa, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's, he completely took over not only Southern California, like you said, but, everyone by storm at what he does. And it's like, the intensity, the being able to score that way, just, and that Mamba, mindset, I think, is just something that besides Michael Jordan, I don't know if we've ever seen it.
No, it's a unique. So how big were the Anaheim Mighty Ducks back in the day?
They were not that big. However, when I was growing up, the Kings and Ducks neither of them had won a Stanley Cup yet. So the Ducks got there first, and I think once the Ducks won, that's when the hockey craze really started growing in Southern California. Started seeing a lot more rinks pop up and things like that, and then the Kings, of course, took 2 and 3 years in 2012 and 2014. In SoCal, there's hockey everywhere now.
Now, did you grow up a Dodger fan as well?
Dodgers, yep, Dodgers for life. All my friends are actually Angel fans. So when the Angels won, was that 2003? I kind of felt a little bit left out. But the way it's going nowadays, it feels like we've made up the ground there.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, I had Dodger influence. I was born in Oklahoma, and we were close to Missouri. So the closest team in proximity was the Cardinals. So when I was little, I didn't like the Dodgers because they were, the Cards' nemesis. But as I got older, I had a friend who was a scout for the Dodgers for years. And then I had various friends who lived in L.A. who were also Dodger fans. And then I went down to L.A. and went to Dodger Stadium. And you realize how cool of a place that is. It's iconic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my 8th grade teacher, Mr. Kink, was a big-time Dodger fan, and so I was in his homeroom class during the '88 World Series.
Oh, there you go.
And so that was like a big celebration. But over the course of time, I've been to a variety of different Dodger series, and I just like watching their ball team right now because they got multiple guys on the squad that I love. Like Freddie Freeman's one of my favorite players in baseball. I still can't believe the Braves let him go.
I know.
And the Dodgers are there to scoop him up, and now you got him and Mookie Betts. And Shohei is just crazy, but yeah, they're a great organization.
Yeah, and it's they've kind of always, I feel like they've always had a little bit of a foundation going, but haven't really gotten over the hump until these past 6, 7, 8 years.
Have you done the Dodger Stadium tour?
I have not done anything besides sitting in the seats and screaming from up top.
You should do the tour sometime. I learned it's a great tour. You get a chance to go and into different areas, but you can see the trophies and the history. But the one little tidbit that I learned that was really cool is, when you're at Dodger Stadium, you always see the orange 76 signs, right?
Yep.
And they're always in the back, and they're always on display. And, you see those things over the course of time. You don't know what the deal is. Well, on the tour, I realized that when Chavez Ravine was originally constructed back in the early 60s, the 76 Oil Company was helped with the financing for the original stadium.
Okay.
And it was written into the contract, a lifetime deal to where they get to have their signs in the stadium. So you learn little details like that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right, so we'll get to the Elite Eight matchups in just a moment. But I wanted to ask you this. When you're managing a sports book, obviously you're trying, like any business, you're trying to turn a profit, right? So what are the duties that you do? What are the things that you can do to help turn a profit? Is it by the numbers? I mean, how does that process work?
Yeah,
I'm fascinated by the business of a sports.
Yeah, well, and a lot of times, it's you do certain things to to set in motion, but you still are at the mercy of, the results of the games and everything like that.
Yeah, because you can't control the outcome,
exactly,
which is weird.
Exactly. So, you do what you can to, like we've talked about before, sometimes you want to maybe balance, if it's a bigger game, you might want to try and balance bets on both sides of it. If it's a late in the season or a playoff type game, you might take the futures pool, the outright winner pool into account there. And maybe you're not as quick to move a line because a certain team might pay a lot more if they do win it all, things like that. So
no, that makes sense. That's why the Super Bowl or those big events are a little more nerve-wracking, because if there's many more bets in and there's a lot more money in the market and you're out of balance, that can be more damaging than a regular season game.
Right. I mean, going into a Super Bowl, we'll just use the Chiefs and Eagles as an example again, but you could potentially, be $100,000 lopsided on one side for the spread, but for all you know, you need that team to win for the future pool and pay out the same. So it's kind of, a little bit of a balancing act and just making sure that you're not slow to move your lines, different things.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if you have a game where you're looking to maybe even out the action like you were talking about, you may keep the line at a certain number knowing that number could encourage to get some of the bets on the other side that you're looking for.
Correct. When actually we last year when Washington played Michigan, in the college football championship game there, we were so heavy on Washington with the future bets and everything. And so we did kind of have the Michigan number a lot lower than most places around the country just because that balancing act.
I know for sports books, parlays are a very good thing for business, right? Because they're hard to hit. Mm-hmm. Now, on the occasional hit, someone can get a nice payout. But over the course of a full year, like the $20, the $10, the $30 parlays, do those add up pretty well for a sports book for you guys and everywhere else?
Absolutely, they do. I mean, generally speaking, sometimes it's as much as 4 to 5 times. You're holding as 4 or 5 times as much as you might on point spreads, money line bets, straight bets, things like that.
What's the biggest parlay you've paid out here? Like, was it like an 8-teamer, a 10-teamer? Has anyone ever hit like a 12-teamer?
We've done. So we're able to go up to 15,
yes.
And we have paid out a couple of 15-teamers.
Unbelievable!
It's crazy.
So when you see that, you're like, no way.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you see someone place the bet, and you're kind of just you don't think twice about it. It's like it's almost.
Thanks for the money. We appreciate your business.
Yeah. Exactly. And then when they come up to cash, it's like, whoa, let me do a triple take here, and look at it, and it's just. I mean, it happens every once in a while. We call them unicorns.
Yeah.
Just because of how rare they are, but it happens.
That's interesting. Now, will you get more money involved in like the title game coming up next week compared to like the Elite Eight, or how does that work for the championship game compared to the other rounds where you have so many games?
Yeah, for the game itself, it's going to be more money, but anytime that you have multiple games going on the same day, like the Elite Eight round itself will probably have more money than the championship game, but it's 4 games to 1. So it just depends, and then that goes on sports, different sports as well. The way like Super Bowl, for example, that's going to be the biggest bet game, the most money of any weekend all season, every single year. Whereas
there's no event even close to that, right?
Not even close.
Yeah.
No. And whereas March Madness, you might see the round of 64 or the round of 32 be more heavily bet than anything else.
But the Super Bowl, I mean, it's not just here. That's every sports book across the country, right?
Yeah, and that's non-sports people, sports people, everyone's watching that one. So,
all right, we're talking with Justin Ballinger, who is the sportsbook manager here at Spirit Mountain Casino. Let's take a look at some of these matchups that we have in the Elite Eight. We'll start with the games today, coming up at 3:09 on TBS and True TV. This is out of the West region, Justin. You've got the 3-seed Texas Tech, who survived their last game. They're taking on the 1-seed Florida. What's the latest number you have on this game?
All right. Florida opened at 6.5. We're up to 7.5 with the Gators here. Florida is being heavily bet both on the spread and new trend that's popped up for this NCAA tournament is a lot of money line parlays on the 1-seeds. So Florida's money line is being used, in a lot of parlays as well.
I didn't know, and I looked it up to double check, but the last time that all 4 number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four was 2008. That's a long time.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't feel like that.
Now, back in, I think it was 2016, all 4 number 1s reached the Elite Eight, but only one of those teams had
themselves.
All right, so based on what you just told me then, so you're I would guess you're pulling for Texas Tech in this game then.
We are for this one, yep.
So what do you think about that number? Did that seem right when it came out? 6.5, moving up to 7.5?
I actually thought that one was a little high. I would have guessed more around 5. But, Florida, they kind of – so the last game when they were playing, the points during the game where they weren't necessarily on, they did have their big man, Alex Condon, out for a good stretch of that. And once he did come back into the game, they turned it back on. They pulled away from Maryland. And I think, him being healthy here, that's kind of fueling that a little bit.
That's interesting. The SEC got off to a rough start in the tournament, but as it's moved along in action, the top teams in the conference have done very well.
Yeah, and I think those 4, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and Auburn all year were the 4 that kind of separated themselves, and they're still dancing.
Still showing it.
Yep.
All right, this game here is a titanic matchup. I was trying to think back to my favorite tournament game ever, probably UNLV and Duke back in 1991 in the national semifinal, which was great, but this on paper's got the makings of a great game. You've got the 2-seed Alabama against the 1-seed Duke in the East region. Bama's coming off the game where they hit a tournament record 25 threes, and Duke, of course, able to execute down the stretch, get a big game from Cooper Flagg, and take out Arizona. What's the latest number you have on this game?
It's actually, the exact same as the Florida-Texas Tech game. Open 6.5. We're up to 7.5 for Duke. And, yeah, you'd think, the way that Bama just scored, hit the 25 threes, put up 113 points, think it might be a little tighter, but got to take it. I think Duke has kind of turned into the consensus top-tier team of this group of 8.
Yeah.
So I think, that's kind of fueling this number being a little bit higher than what you might expect.
Do you think you're getting good value there with Alabama, a team as potent as they are, getting 7.5?
I mean, I can tell you this: if they're down 13 late, they could hit 2 threes right there, at the end and pull to 7.
Well, the one thing you and I both like about Duke, and this is what Alabama's facing, is they're young, but they're incredibly talented. Cooper Flagg is a superstar, and Duke has been well coached throughout the course of the year. They don't make a lot of mistakes.
No, they don't. And, with the depth they have, if the freshman, inexperience ever shows itself, which it hasn't really so far, they do have other guys they can rely on there.
All right, Justin, going back to last night, how did those games turn out for you with Auburn topping Michigan 78-65, Houston over Purdue in a close one 62-60, Michigan State came from behind to beat Ole Miss 73-70, and then Tennessee double-digit win over Kentucky 78-65.
Yeah, I will say the Kentucky-Tennessee game was easily the best outcome for us. We had a lot of money on Kentucky, so Tennessee kind of had that game under control start to finish. So that was and
you made a good point here that anytime you have a team in college basketball where they lose the first 2 games on the year to an opponent, they get that third time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they'll be able to get over the hump.
Exactly. They've got the scouting, and also, they have the chip on their shoulder at that point.
So Tennessee turned out to be a good turn.
Tennessee,
for the
that was definitely the best game for us yesterday.
That's awesome. All right, Sunday, more good matchups. 11:20 on CBS on Sunday in the Elite Eight out of the Midwest. You got the top 2 seeds, Houston and Tennessee. What's the latest number you have here?
On Tennessee-Houston, we have 3.5. That one opened at 3.5. It remains at 3.5 in favor of Houston. Right now, we have actually, this is kind of our least bet game. We don't have a crazy big need at this point in time. However, this game was set late last night after we closed. I expect, we'll get a lot more action on it. So we'll know more, as we approach tomorrow with that one.
And based on what you're telling me, you have a lot of respect for Houston in terms of how hard they play their defense. They get after you early.
Yeah, they do. They get after it. That. As you saw last night, the offense might go through some stretches, and I think that's probably Houston's biggest, focal point going forward.
All right, the second game tomorrow, this is out of the South, also the top 2 seeds, Auburn and Michigan State. The Tigers right now a 4.5-point favorite, and we talked about Auburn yesterday. They may have peaked a little bit early, but they've kind of picked things back up lately in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. The second half last night in the Michigan game, I believe, they went on something like an 18-2, 18-4 run at one point, and once that hit, it just looked like it was the Auburn Tigers of November and December again, where they were just rolling, hitting everything. The defense was out of control, good for Auburn.
And the coaching matchup here is about as good as it gets with Izzo and Bruce Pearl.
Exactly. I mean, you look at it and you say, well, Michigan State, they feel like they're probably a step behind Auburn, but what Tom Izzo's able to do every year, you can't count them out.
What did the line open up here at the casino?
So actually, 4.5. We're actually up to 5.5.
Wow.
Yeah, on Auburn. So a lot of Auburn love coming in, and as I mentioned, kind of similar with Florida earlier, a lot of Auburn money lines being thrown in on parlays here.
So what I'm trying to figure out is what we're seeing now, it's a shift where early in the tournament you said people were hitting the dogs, and now we're seeing a turn where people are starting to jump on the favorites. Do you think that's because of how the tournament's played out with the top teams looking so good?
Yeah, I think so. And, you turn on ESPN, Fox Sports, all these networks, and, all they're talking about is how the chalk's been advancing and things like that. So, I think a lot of everyone's kind of viewing it in that light, I think.
What does your gut tell you about, the Elite Eight? Do you think we're going to see chalk continue to dominate moving into the Final Four, or do you think we might get a couple of upsets?
My gut has been pretty wrong so far this tournament because I always think there's
Welcome to the world of sports gambling.
Yeah, exactly. I always think there's going to be a couple upsets, especially in this tournament, We'll see. Again, the margin between these teams at this point, it's number 3 playing number 6 in the country. If it's going to happen, it's go time for it to happen now.
That is amazing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to these matchups here, and I guess, like I told you, the only thing I really want is I feel conflicted because I don't hate this Duke team like we were talking about yesterday. They're kind of likable, but I just want Cooper Flagg in the Final Four because that gives me a little bit more time to fantasize about him being a trailblazer, and then we can see him on that stage.
Exactly, yeah. I think that's most important. You want to have the best players in the sport playing as late into the season as possible. Similar as we touched on also, in Caitlin Clark on Iowa, if they had lost in the second round or something, that would have been,
it would have been
terrible.
Brutal.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, you can keep the best players going as long as possible. Auburn, Janai Broom is the only other person I think that's been in the Player of the Year conversation with Duke. He's still going, so we got some big names still in there.
I was going to ask about betting options like in baseball. Do you have props day to day? So, Aaron Judge with – a monster day, 3 home runs. Do you have those type of bets where you have over/under on home runs for certain players?
Yeah. We have certain players on each team. We'll have if they'll hit a home run during the game. We have things as mentioned before, no runs first inning. You can obviously bet first 5 innings, first 7 innings, things. So there's a few different props out there.
And you said some of the popular props for college basketball is this first team to 20. Is that what it is?
We have first team to 15.
First team to 15.
Yep. Yeah, and that's always a fun one, And as we mentioned, the dogs. At least this tournament's been all favorites, but the dogs have won, the first to 15 plenty throughout so far.
Yeah, see, that'd be a lot of fun. You might get people to jump on Alabama as the first to 15, and then all of a sudden they go ice cold from downtown.
Right.
25 threes the other night.
Start 4 for 5 from downtown, but might cool off. Who knows?
Well, this is your place to bet on college sports. Spirit Mountain Casino with the Vegas-style sports book with the cushy chairs. You can hang out. Justin and I are sitting just across the way from 10 Barrel Brewing where you can grab a bite and a brew. We got the stadium bar, and then what I really like, and people are still finding out about it, but the Top Golf Swing Suite is pretty awesome. And when I was here last week for the drawing, Pot of Gold, it was packed in there. So you had people competing and playing golf. It's like Spirit Mountain is becoming a destination spot from the standpoint that, if you want other activities aside from the gambling, with the Top Golf and different things that are being added, it's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, later tonight we have the whole swing suite is booked again. And, it's not just golf. You can do, you can play hockey on there, footballs, you can throw passes, baseball, dodgeball. There's an endless list of games that you can play on these swing suites.
The other question I was curious about, Justin, is when it comes to line setting, like you guys use this service from MGM, and in Vegas, do they still have a certain group of people that help set the lines? Is it all done by computers and analytics, or is it a combination of both? How does that work?
I think there's still a combination. There's a lot of kind of consensus numbers that come out through computers, and a lot of books will start there. I do know, though, that, like we do, we have the ability to override and change it if we need to.
Yeah.
So a lot of books.
And that comes back to your regional biases, right?
Regional biases. Yeah. Again, looking at future pools, for example, might change. We don't want that line opening there. We need to move it down a point or so. Again, just different reasons for moving it here and there.
Yeah, because a place like Spirit Mountain will get an inordinate number of action, maybe on like the Seahawks or the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's can't get enough of the Oregon Ducks here.
Now, do you have contacts, because you've worked elsewhere and you've been down in Vegas before, do you have people you'll reach out to? Like if you see a number that's interesting, will you check in with some of the people to see what's going on with a particular game?
Yeah, we actually have aside from being able to call them and text them, we do have some software services where you can see other sports books around the country, what their lines are currently at. They'll show you what time they moved, when they moved, how much they moved, things like that. And
are the numbers usually pretty close, or is there sometimes disparity from book to book depending on location?
They are pretty close. I mean, and it depends on the sport too. Football, obviously the spreads aren't going to be crazy big like NFL, for example. So, you might see a bunch of sixes, but the juice, maybe 110 on one minus 120 on another. Whereas in basketball, with like an over-under, for example, where the number could be 242, you might see a couple at 240, a couple at 244. So it just depends on the sport.
Have you had any of the sharps that you're aware of that have come in to play the tournament?
Yeah, we've had a couple guys that have seemingly just been on the right side, a few times, even hitting the few dogs that we have. So, I mean, they're always out there, and sometimes you can learn from them as well. A lot of times when I was in Vegas, we did have a bunch of sharps, and, if a couple of them came in really early on a line and they all were hitting the same side, that sometimes that can tell you, maybe that's the side and we need to be wary of that.
I love that. You can use, like, some people that have a good chance of getting over on the house, but at the same time, if you know where they're at or what they're thinking based on where the number's at, that can give you good insight that, hey, we're on the right side here.
Yes.
Or we need to adjust.
Yes, exactly. It goes both. And sometimes, maybe you have 4 sharps and 2 are on one side, 2 are on the other right from the get-go, and sometimes you just let the line ride.
Will you compare sometimes to, like, DraftKings with the Oregon Lottery to see where their numbers are at compared to what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely, especially for the non-college sports, since DraftKings doesn't have college betting.
Like NFL, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll compare, and because at least here in Oregon there's only the few betting options that there are, whereas in Las Vegas there might be 16, 17, 18 different sports books that guys have access to, so you don't want to necessarily get too far off a consensus, down there and leave yourself open to potentially be hit.
Well, that's an interesting part, too. I hadn't thought about, like, here, especially in Oregon with college sports, you have less direct competition. But I'm wondering for a place like Vegas where you have so many sports books, you have to keep your numbers competitive, right? Because someone else could be like, well, I'm just going to go down the street because they got a better number here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of times why you'll see, places like Circa Sports, like a lot of times in baseball, they'll offer minus 105 on both MLB teams instead of, the traditional minus 110 for both, just, as a kind of an incentive almost to get people to bet there.
Have you been to Circa Sports yet?
I have. I've been there 3 or 4 times now.
Because they've got multiple levels. But what I like about what they do is they're really trying to I've heard from their director and the way they set it up, like trying to be really player friendly, meaning they have posted limits so what the maximum is you can bet on a game. They want to be very flexible with the lines and try to offer the best numbers possible so they can bring in as much action as possible. I kind of like their philosophy. They're very pro player,
absolutely.
Instead of being a little stuffy, like cause sometimes if someone wants to put down a bigger wager, from what I understand, like sometimes you got to talk to a guy who will go and talk to another manager or whatever. But at Circa, they they're very friendly in terms of what you want to do.
Yeah, and the other thing I really like that Circa does too, they post their limits for every single bet they have. And that's just good transparency for the guests, because if you're trying to bet big, a lot of times you'll go to a place and they'll turn you down, and that's obviously really disappointing. But what I like about Circa is you literally can see what the limit is for each bet, each game, each line, and I think that kind of transparency is really good for the guests as well.
I agree. I think the transparency is important, and especially now that sports wagering is becoming so popular across the country. Once the feds legalize it, now more states are picking it up and offering it as an option. I think it's important that the sports leagues and the sports books and everything, that they remain transparent so that the players know that what they're getting is legit.
Right, and then that goes to what you just mentioned. If you're not transparent, maybe they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, you could lose out on the competition. That's pretty awesome, man. Justin Ballinger, sportsbook manager here at Spirit Mountain Casino. All right, so we've got Elite Eight this weekend. We've got the Final Four, which is on April 5th and April 7th. Those are the primary big focuses for you right now. Any UFC or anything else coming up in the near future?
Well, the week after the championship game is Masters Week.
Masters Week, which is great.
Is always great.
Especially the final round, right?
Oh, yeah. The Sunday is fantastic. We'll have that on the big screen going pretty much the entire day, I plan on.
And then the other thing you mentioned yesterday, I want to make sure people know that's cool, but for the first time ever, you're going to have offerings for the Kentucky Derby.
Yes, we should have Kentucky Derby wagering. It'll be day of, but we will have wagering on the Kentucky Derby. So come on down and enjoy the race.
That's pretty awesome. I like the horses. I love the horse race, and it's always a big event. Well, Justin, thanks again for having me down here. I love hanging out, and the Elite Eight today is going to kick off coming up here in just a couple of hours. And we got two matchups, 3:09, Texas Tech and Florida on TBS and True TV. And then we got Bama and Duke at 5:49 on TBS and True TV. And like Justin said, if you come down, if maybe you're focusing on a different game, all you have to do is go up to the desk and ask, and you'll put the game on for them.
Absolutely, yeah. Always, if you don't see a game you want on TV, just come up and ask, and we'll do our best to accommodate you.
All right. How much caffeine have you hit so far today?
Oh, boy. Well, it's, day 8 of the NCAA tournament now, so we're up there.
That's great. Justin Ballinger, sportsbook manager here at Spirit Mountain Casino. Come on down and join us. Great place to hang out, watch the games, Vegas-style sportsbook. You can get in on the action. Your place to bet on college sports. Justin, as always, man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you again. Do it next time.
We'll keep things rolling here live at Spirit Mountain Casino. We'll talk Final Four with Michael Holden, who just missed out on winning a national championship with UCLA. That's coming up at 3. Well, it is a Saturday show. We could just play Phil Collins and Genesis for the next 2.5 hours. Misunderstanding. Love this song. The mistake. This is like the theme song for my life right here. For hours. And the only disappointing part is that he did not play this song at the concert I went to. I love Phil. Totally down with Phil. I'm looking at a post on X right now, and this is how I know that the NIL has gone to a different level. Cam Scattaboo, who is like one of my favorite college football players of all time, the Arizona State Sun Devil, who is entering the NFL draft. I'm praying to the good Lord above that the Denver Broncos have the wherewithal to select and draft Cam Scattaboo, because I believe that he's just a flat-out baller. And wherever he winds up, he's going to find a way to help that team win football games, because he's a relentless worker. He's tough as nails, great in short yardage, good hands for a fullback / running back, special teams. Whatever you want him to do, he'll do. He's kind of like Donovan Kling. It's like, Coach, I just want to win. Use me however you want to use me. You know, it's like that's how he is. He just has that type of approach. I love Cam Scattaboo. Now, Sean Payton, draft him, dang it. I reached out to my boy Benjamin Albright, who is well-connected around the league, and I asked him yesterday, hey, Ben, do the Broncos have interest in Cam Scattaboo? His response, not that I've heard of. That was disappointing. Anyways, I'm looking at this ad from Cameron Scattaboo, and it says, if I have turf with my name on it, it will be, quote, the toughest turf you'll ever find. That's exactly what scat turf is. It'll take a beating and still give you great performance for years. Scat Turf is a proud partner of the Sun Angel Collective. Click now for a free estimate. And it shows a picture of him on some turf that says Scat Turf, residential and commercial. Your phone number in the greater Phoenix area, 480-490-9903. Scat Turf. That is amazing. That's awesome. I may buy some just to support Cameron Scattaboo. I tried to get my dad. This goes back to my younger days. You know how maybe there are a lot of you guys out there that can relate to this, but when I was younger, my room was awesome. It was like a sports shrine. I had posters everywhere. I had John Elway everywhere. I had MJ. I had Byron Scott, Magic Johnson, Clyde Drexler. Like, my whole room was littered with, like, Sports Illustrateds, different posters. And this is back in the day when you could go to that place. What was that place in the mall? Was it Spencer? Anyways, you could go to these places in the mall and they'd have these dope, like, sports posters. And I tried to talk my dad into getting rid of the carpet in my room and lay down AstroTurf to make it look like a football field. And he looked at me and I looked at him and he said, that's a ridiculous idea. No. And so he ruined my dreams. But the way I had it in my mind was like AstroTurf down, and I could have like the Broncos colors, like 2 different end zones in my room. And I had like one of the old school water beds too. And he said no. He shut that down in a heartbeat. So maybe now I can live up my dream. I'm going to buy some scat turf and maybe just carpet the entire crib with scat turf, or at least in my bedroom. Maybe that's the idea. Cameron Scattaboo, the toughest turf in the United States, scat turf. If I have my name on it, it'll be the toughest turf you'll ever find. Now, if I showed this to my dad, he would buy it just to support Cameron Scattaboo. All right, we'll keep things rolling. I'm live here at Spirit Mountain Casino for the Elite Eight, your place to bet on college sports, a special Saturday edition of the Rip City Drive. Boy, I love George Benson. Nice work, Shacker. How about George Benson? What you should do, Shacker, is pull up a little My Latin Brother. George Benson is a terrific guitar player, and it's so good. I'm hanging out here at Spirit Mountain Casino. Elite 8 today, and if you're coming down to watch games, that's a very good choice. The action will get underway coming up at 3:09. Yeah, that's going to be the first tip, Texas Tech and Florida. Texas Tech and Florida. And that's going to be True TV and TBS. The Gators a 7.5-point favorite. And then we got Duke and Bama. Duke is a 7.5-point favorite. That game will tip off at 5:49 on TBS and True TV. So we got some good action. We got a lot of games coming up. I'm going to be joined by Michael Holton, who's going to join us coming up at approximately 3 o'clock. He was in the Final Four. He played at UCLA, and I want to get his take on that whole experience. I really like Michael Holton, but he really enjoyed his time at UCLA and, had a chance to talk, play for Larry Brown. And I think that whole experience was great. He thought it was going to be easy to get back to more Final Fours, and it just didn't work out that way. Yeah! All right, I want to shift focus for just a moment to the Blazers, who are going to be in action tomorrow. They're taking on the Knickerbockers. Travis is in New York, getting a chance to spend a day with his family on an off day. Tip-off tomorrow at 3. Our coverage will start at 1 with Blazers game day. But a couple things I want you to hear from Coach coming off that game against Sacramento. They just didn't have the energy or, I don't know, the little kick in their step. There was like a glaze over their eyes. They looked tired. And they didn't have it on defense. They didn't have it on offense. The Kings shot 64%. They out-rebounded the Blazers. They won the fast break battle. All the key statistical categories were in favor of Sacramento, and that's not something that, Coach Billups would want because he knows his team, they've got to hit all the margins to be able to compete. They can't just show up and win games because they don't have the experience or the talent. So they've got to outwork teams, and here he is on that loss.
Guys, before the game started, the most physical team will win the game. I was right. They were so much more physical than we were. Our thing is to always hit first, and we want people retreating, playing against us. And we didn't get that done today. We didn't. My observation for us all the time is we need to be the hardest playing team because sometimes that hides our inexperience and our youth. When you're not the hardest playing team, then it becomes who's more experienced, who's more talented. And that team has more talent than us. They got more experience than us. So we didn't give ourselves the best chance, the way we started.
Yeah. They didn't show up and play the way that they need to. And that's got to be frustrating for Coach because for the last couple of months his team has done that. Now, I'm not going to throw the Trailblazers under the bus. Everyone's going to have games like that. But it's just a good reminder that for this team to be able to compete and win games, they've got to, really pay attention to the details. Their energy to start games, their defensive intensity, their connectedness, and they can't allow another team to be more physical. And that was the frustrating part. Just look at Sabonis, 22 points, 19 rebounds. The amount of points in the paint, 60-32. The Kings won that game because they were the aggressor. They were more physical, and they won the battle inside. And the Blazers can not afford to be outworked like that. Now, leading up to that game, their defense since January 1st has been really good. And Coach talked about the recent defense and shared his thoughts on that.
It's been up and down. We played some of the most elite teams in basketball, so I don't want to overcook that. Some of these teams that we have played over the last week and a half, they score that many points on everybody. They make everybody look that way. At the same time, we've done a pretty good job when we're focused and locked in of holding people to less points than most people do, So we just don't have a huge margin of error to have those tough nights. We just don't.
Yeah, that's really what it's about. This is probably my favorite clip, but Coach went on to further, discuss what his team needs to win games. And he kind of went back to his opening statement, but take a listen to this because this sums it up. This kind of gives you an idea of what Coach Billups is all about.
I think it's simple. It's the way I started this, and we have to be the hardest playing team to be able to compete. When we play that game, we got to be able to play harder than the team that we're playing against for us to compete. And like I said, when we don't, some of our things show, and they're pretty loud.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So the Blazers will get a chance to respond. My guess is, whether they win or not tomorrow against the Knicks, I don't know, but I do expect their energy, their effort, their focus, their intensity to be totally different than what we saw against Sacramento, especially with a couple of days off. You get a chance to reset, get a little bit of rest. I know one thing, the Blazers will give a maximum effort tomorrow. And in regards to the play-in, they probably need to go 4-1 on the road trip if they want to have a chance going into the final week of the regular season. If we take a look at the current standings for your Trailblazers right now, they sit with a record of 32-42, far exceeding all expectations, by the way. They are right now 4 games behind the Dallas Mavericks, who are currently in 10th, and 4.5 games behind Sacramento. So it's going to be tough. They're 3 games behind the Suns, who are in front of them. So it doesn't look good. If you just do simple math, you're 4 games behind the Mavs, who have the tiebreak, so technically it's 5 games with 8 games to go. Yeah, it's very unlikely that the Trailblazers would be in a position to make the play-in. Not impossible, but unlikely, especially after that loss to Sacramento. But as I've said before, the play-in was never my main focus. I cared more about, the Blazers developing the young players, which they've been able to do. And the Knicks are fun to watch. That's going to be a good game tomorrow. I thought that first game at Moda Center a couple of weeks ago was a terrific matchup, great intensity, and a thrilling finish in overtime. But what I like about the Knicks is, one, their coach is crazy. Tom Thibodeau is a hard-nosed coach, defensive-minded coach, and he plays his key guys a ton of minutes, more than any other coach in the NBA. So I like his old-school approach. But that's a team that's got a togetherness. They play really hard. And it's no surprise when you have guys like Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. I mean, those guys are heart and soul. Mikal Bridges is terrific. I think Karl Anthony Towns has turned out to be a great Knick. He's had a terrific season. I wasn't sure how that trade would work out, or if Karl Anthony Towns would kind of fit the mentality of Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks, but he's been a nice little, add-in. Now, are they going to be good enough to compete in the Eastern Conference? They can compete with Cleveland in a 7-game series, but I just look at the Eastern Conference where it's like Boston and then everyone else. And I understand that Cleveland's got the best record in the East, but I do think Boston's the better team. I think what Boston has done this year is, once you win the championship and get over the hump, which they did, you understand what it takes to get there. And so I just don't think Boston has had the same type of, maniac personality, making that push to the finish line. I think the key is just to be healthy so when you enter the playoffs, you can play your best basketball. So I think Boston is going to make it through the East and reach the NBA Finals. And in the Western Conference, I have no reason to believe that Oklahoma City won't get there. Their lack of experience or the fact they haven't done it before is really the only pause. But if you look at their talent, their defense, their offensive capabilities, they have an MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they're going to have home court advantage in a place that's very difficult to win games. There's no reason to believe they won't get it done. They are a more complete team than Denver, the Lakers, the Warriors, the Rockets, or anybody else in the Western Conference. I love the Rockets roster, and I love what Udoka has done in terms of coaching that team. They're young and athletic. My only question about them is, in the playoffs where the game will slow down and become more of a half-court type affair, do they have enough, shooting to get the job done? I doubt it. They're going to need to tinker with that roster a little bit. But the Rockets are close, and they're well coached. But, NBA playoff basketball is different. What I love about the NBA playoffs, aside from, guys caring that much more because it's playoff basketball, but in a 7-game series, what's nice is the coaches and the preparation, it's ramped up several notches. So in the regular season where you have teams flying around the country, they don't have time to go in depth with their game plans. They have a scouting report. They have a discussion about some of the things they want to accomplish, but there's no real in-depth scouting like there is in the postseason. But once you hit the postseason and you get a few days off to prepare for a series, these coaches will go in and they dive into the film. They scour everything, and then they come up with a specific game plan for how to attack the other team's weaknesses. And then with each passing game in the series, as you become more familiar with the opponent, then you start to learn how to deal with them a little bit better, and you continue to refine your focus in the game plan to attack that weakness. And I love seeing those battles play out and how it works out. And then on the emotional side, what happens is when you see the same opponent over the course of 2 weeks and you're playing multiple games against that same team, the players have a tendency to get tired of one another. And that's where some skirmishes will break out. Guys will start to tell each other how they feel about them, and that's where the drama really kicks up. So I like everything about playoff basketball. But with the Lakers, all these other teams outside Oklahoma City in the West, they all have question marks. The Rockets, can they shoot well enough? They're young. Denver has had, depth and defensive issues throughout the course of the year, although they're playing better basketball now. The Lakers have defensive issues, rebounding concerns. Do they have enough size to compete against some of the bigger teams in the Western Conference? And the Warriors, the same thing. Will they be able to defend at a level that is good enough to be able to beat a team like Oklahoma City? That's a very good question. I do love the addition of Jimmy Butler. He has fit even better than I thought, and I thought he would fit pretty well. And he and Draymond have respect for one another, and I think they'll be able to create some havoc in the postseason. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, the potential first-round matchups that we're looking at right now, you could have right now it would be Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Houston, and Golden State, Denver and the Clippers, Lakers and Grizzlies. That is a great set of first-round matchups. In the Eastern Conference, it would be right now today, Cleveland, Orlando, very good, Boston and Atlanta, Knicks and Bucks, tremendous first-round matchup. And then you get the Indiana Pacers and Detroit Pistons in the 4-5 matchup in the East if the playoffs started today. Yeah, Detroit is one of the feel-good stories in the NBA. They were a league worst last year, dead last in the NBA, and right now they're sitting 10 games above 500 at 42 and 32. They've won 3 straight games, and they're going to be in the postseason. They've got themselves all the way up to the 5 seed. And Milwaukee will continue to dip, without Damian Lillard. The Bucks just 7 games over 500. And then there's some teams that you look at that are just garbage. Like I've been watching the Suns of late. That's a team that doesn't care about winning. They don't seem to like each other. It sounds like their coach is on the way out. Like Phoenix is a tough watch, and they have no commitment to the defensive end at all, like zero. They don't even try to play defense. They're an embarrassment right now. The Bucks are a mess right now. So I think there's really one team in the East in Boston, and then in the West it's one team in Oklahoma City. And the question is, can you find a team or two? I would guess if I had to pick one of those teams, Denver, Golden State, or the Lakers, who would give Oklahoma City a run, it would be Denver. And that's because of Nikola Jokic. He's so good and so elite with his, mind, his passing, his the way he sets up his teammates. He is a sensational basketball player. And I've grown to really respect him and appreciate the way he plays. He's smart. He's aggressive. He gets after it. Like, everything about Jokic is great. And he reminds me of Larry Bird, with the vision. Like, he's got eyes in the back of his head. A big man who can shoot with touch. He can bang down low. And it's very weird to see a 7-footer running the pick and roll like a guard. It's just not fair. It's not fair what he's able to accomplish. I would give him the MVP, although I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will win the award. I do think that Jokic is the most valuable player in the NBA. But it's hard to deny Shai Gilgeous based on how Oklahoma City has played this year, the fact they got over 60 wins, and Shai Gilgeous has been on top of his game and has been great throughout the entire season. So that's kind of where I see the NBA right now. We could be on a collision course with Boston and Oklahoma City. And I think that would be a terrific final because both teams are deep, both teams can shoot, and both teams have star power. And credit to Jason Tatum, too. He's been the man on Boston this year. A couple of years ago it was kind of he and Brown, but this year Tatum's kind of elevated his game. And, watching, when you see Boston in person, and for those of you who were at the Moda Center last weekend when you saw Boston in town, it's almost not fair that they have two guys in Tatum and Brown. You don't realize how big and strong those guys are until you see them in person. And the way Jason Tatum was aggressively working to get his position on the floor, how tough he is, his body, and how he's willing to bang. I'm just impressed. And then defensively, their capabilities. And then for Boston, what they've done is they've done a great job of surrounding Tatum and Brown with guys who can just flat out shoot. And they spread those shooters around on the floor, and they open up the floor with their three-point shooting. They are using – the new NBA world is being perfected right now by Boston. And that's why it's going to be fascinating. I'm going to be fascinated to watch Luka. I can't believe the Lakers got him. I've enjoyed watching him play on the Lakers. He's made them a lot of fun. And Jimmy Butler has made the Warriors relevant once again. And Golden State's sitting there at 42-31. And Steph Curry, I feel like the arrival of Butler kind of rejuvenated him just a little bit. in terms of what he's trying to do and what he wants to accomplish, but he's been great. All right, let me get you up to date here. I'm at Spirit Mountain Casino for the Elite Eight here at Spirit, here in the sports book, and I'm going to be down here until 4 o'clock on air. Michael Holton's going to join us coming up at 3 o'clock. Texas Tech and Florida tips off at 3:09 on TBS and True TV. The Gators right now a 7.5-point favorite. At 5:49, it's going to be Bama and Duke on TBS and True TV, and Duke right now a 7.5-point favorite. Now, if you haven't been paying attention because you're out doing different things around the yard or whatever, Aaron Judge put together quite a day. 3 homers and 8 RBIs in the Yankees' demolition of the Brewers 20-9 at Yankee Stadium. And I'd asked Travis Demers, I said, are you going to a Yankee game on the off day? And he's like, no, I'm going to go spend time with the parents. Yeah, that was probably a bad decision, Trav. You probably should have gone to Yankee Stadium and watched Aaron Judge go off. And he just missed a 4th home run, which would have tied the record. There are 18 players in history who have 4 homers in a game, and Judge missed it by like a foot. All right, we'll keep things rolling here. If you want to jump on board, 503-248-0620, a special Saturday edition of the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. Boy, Michael Shacker pulling out some of the hits today. Little Peter Gabriel. I'm live here at Spirit Mountain Casino, getting ready for the Elite Eight action. And then when I'm done here on the show, coming up at 4, I will be hosting the Pot of Gold drawings coming up at 7 o'clock. 3 winners who are going to play the Plinko game. I'm really going to feel like Bob Barker today. And then the winner of the Plinko game will get an actual bar of gold. 1 ounce of gold, which I've noticed the price on gold continues to tick up over the last couple of weeks, which is nice. So that's what's going on today. I'll be back down here on April 5th and April 7th for the Final Four. And if you haven't been down here in the sports book, you should come down and check it out. I love being in here. It's wide open, a lot of space, cushy chairs to sit in. And I walked down to Sips and got a beautiful cup of coffee. And I've been doing a little radio today, just hanging out with you. You know, the Saturday show reminds me of all the old school days in radio and how I got my start along the way, and how the Saturday show for many of us who are doing radio now was kind of it was how we grew, how we developed, how we learned how to get our job done. So it's been nice, and just hanging down here getting ready for the matchup. Michael Holden, former Trailblazer and former coach and current radio and television analyst, is going to join us coming up at 3 o'clock. I want to talk about his Final Four experience and playing for Larry Brown and what that was like to get so close to a championship and not be able to get over the top. I really started to get into the NCAA tournament back in, I think it was around 1986. That's really where I started to pay attention to Oklahoma basketball. And that's where shortly after that, Oklahoma became a dominant basketball team and made a run all the way to the 1988 championship game. And they lost to Kansas in the final at Kemper Arena when Danny Manning was Mr. College Basketball. 4-point loss, and the Sooners had a phenomenal starting 5. Mookie Blaylock, who turned out to be a terrific pro, longtime Atlanta Hawk. Ricky Grace, Stacey King, who was a terrific college basketball player and then went on to play for the Chicago Bulls. Dave Seeger and Harvey Grant at forward. They had a tremendous starting 5. Not great depth, but their starting 5 was terrific, and I thought for sure they were going to win the championship. They were favored to do so, and Danny Manning and Larry Brown got over. Can't believe it, man. That still bothers me to this day because I really did love that basketball team. Harvey Grant, of course, played for the Trailblazers, father of Jeremy Grant, who currently plays for the Trailblazers. And Jeremy was, born during Harvey's time in Portland, brother of Horace Grant. So that's where I first started to get into it. And I remember it was great because that first tournament that I started getting into, where I was watching basketball games all the time, I had a Nerf hoop that I had in my room, and I had the TV, and I'd watch college hoops and play Nerf hoop at the same time. And I remember my parents went on some trip, so Nana and Papa came out to my house in Colorado and watched me and my brother for the week. And the great thing about Nanas compared to moms is that Nanas will supply you with whatever you need to make your viewing pleasure even better. So I remember I had like a bunch of chips. She would make whatever food was necessary, and she bought me a bunch of Twizzlers. And I just remember sitting around eating, playing Nerf hoop, and watching basketball in the tournament. And I thought it was awesome. Really had a lot of fun doing that. And that was right around the time where, did you ever have outdoor school? I went to outdoor school in Colorado, and it was up in the mountains somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but yeah, outdoor school. Did that for a week. But that was that whole time where Nana was out there, and that was right around the tournament time, which was fun. But I enjoyed that. And then I really got into the tournament. Loved watching the UNLV-Duke rivalry. I would say that running Rebs team with Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon, Anderson Hunt, Greg Anthony, that crew, that's probably the most famous or popular college basketball team of my era, because that team was like a traveling circus. I mean, just like a big-time show, like the Beatles, right? Like you knew who the players were. They had won a championship, and it looked like they were going to roll to another championship. And then you had this young team in Duke that was loaded up with stars. Bobby Hurley, Christian Laettner. They had Coach K. They had Brian Davis, Grant Hill, all these, studs. But no one thought they could get over on UNLV. And they had gotten pounded by 30 points in the final back in, I think that was my freshman year. So it was like 90-91 or 1990. UNLV dominated them in the title game, and they brought all those guys back. And so you just thought that that UNLV was going to do it again, and they met in the national semifinal in the next year Final Four, which I think was in Indianapolis, and Duke got the win. And I went back and watched that game the other night. Man, that was highly competitive. But I watched that game in the middle of the night over in Germany because I was over there with my mom. We were staying with my dad for a couple of weeks because he was doing work for the government over there for like 8 weeks over there in Germany. So I hung out, and they would show it on, I think it's like the Armed Forces Network or something like that. But all the basketball games I watched were on in the middle of the night. And so I remember watching that national semifinal with Duke and Kansas. I don't know, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning based on where I was located. And I couldn't get enough of it. But it was great because my dad, he was living on his own, so he had in his little apartment there in Bonn, he had like Hungry Man dinners. So I was hitting the freezer after my parents would go to bed, and I was hitting the microwave. So I had my Hungry Man dinners, and I was watching college basketball. And then I caught an NBA on NBC game, Bulls and Celtics. I got to watch Jordan and Bird duel in like a double overtime game. And it was awesome. And I spent a lot of time on the American base there playing basketball too. Like back in my younger days, I was all about sports like 100% of the time. Playing hoop, watching basketball, watching football, like I was consumed. I was consumed with it, but that's what I remember from those days, watching those Final Fours. And then, of course, I remember quite well the Fab Five, the Michigan meltdown, with the Chris Webber timeout against North Carolina. I've never been a Tar Heel fan. Like, I've always kind of pulled against them, so I was disappointed when I saw Michigan fall apart in that game against North Carolina. But those early days of the tournament were great because the players had identification with the schools. They were with the same schools for multiple years, and then over the course of time, college sports changed, and you had this transition into one and dones where players would come in for a year and then play, and then they would make the jump to the NBA. So it's just different now. I still enjoy the game, but it was just different back then because you knew who the players were going to be on the team. And I would say of all the 30 for 30s, I hate Christian Laettner's right up there near the top. That was a very good one, 30 for 30, because it reminded me of all those times of watching the tournament and stuff. So we'll see how things shake out today. Now, I mentioned it earlier. It's hard to believe, but this is the first time potentially we have not had a Final Four where all number one seeds hit the Final Four since 2008. Now, back in 2016, each number one seed reached the Elite Eight, but only one of those teams advanced into the Final Four. I would say the other Final Fours that jump out, like I remember in 96 when you had Marcus Camby and UMass, Kentucky with that team with Rick Pitino, and then Syracuse being in there. I remember that. And then I remember, I think it was 03, the Syracuse team that won the championship with Melo. Like, he was a dominant basketball player in college, so I remember those things. But there are certain players that jump out. Blake Griffin at Oklahoma was a lot of fun to watch. There's certain guys you come across over the course of time that you remember. But the cool part about back then is that you were so familiar with the player by the time he was done with 4 years at a college that when they entered the NBA, you knew everything about him. So by the time Christian Laettner hit the NBA, I knew everything about him. Same thing with Stacey King. And then some of the college players who were terrific, they end up not having, the NBA careers that you think they're going to have. Now, one player that I really enjoyed was Chris Jackson, who became Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, and he played for the Denver Nuggets. And so I was a big Rauf fan, and I love watching him play because I think he would be one of those players who would fit today's game really well because of his shooting ability. He had a great handle. He had the Tourette's syndrome, which helped produce and I think contribute to his greatness because he was a perfectionist. He had to hit X number of free throws in a row, shots, and different little ticks before he would even leave the gym when he was done with practice. But he was fun to watch. I saw him at the Coliseum play multiple times against the Trailblazers when I was younger. But he and Shaq, like those two guys were together on LSU, Shaq and Chris Jackson, and they didn't win a championship. I can't believe that. Shaq was just a dominant force in college basketball, playing for LSU. And back then when Shaq was in his younger days, he wasn't as fat. This is before Kobe got mad at him for not being in the best of shape. But back in his younger days, he was lean and mean and could, run up and down the floor. I'd never seen anything like it. And then when he entered the NBA in his early days in Orlando, same thing. Lean, mean, would handle the rock on the break and just be dominant in attacking. I remember David Robinson, when he played Shaq as a rookie, they interviewed him after the game. He was like, man, that guy's strong. He couldn't believe it. But, yeah, I remember all those days. But, the tournament, and then back in the day with Sports Illustrated, you would get the Wednesday or Thursday before the tournament began, you would open up your Sports Illustrated, and right in the middle they'd have this awesome, pull-out bracket. And I think Travis Demers did the same thing, but I would pull that out, and I would go through the meticulous process of filling out my bracket and see who I thought was going to win the championship. So it was a lot of fun. So today we got these games coming up, tip-off at 3:09 in the first game, Texas Tech and Florida, and then Duke and Alabama. Now, what I did is I'm in this bracket challenge that I do with some people up in North Portland. I just picked a bracket this year that I thought that was chalk heavy because I thought the chalk would do well. There's no guarantee because a lot of times you get the upset and it punctures your entire bracket, but I'm doing very well because I didn't pick any upsets. It's just one of those weird years where I decided not to go with any upsets, and it's paid dividends at this point now. So I need both Florida and Duke to win. And then tomorrow I've got Tennessee getting in, and I've got Auburn getting in. So all four of my final teams are still alive. We'll just see how it plays out. The one thing I know about Houston, in that matchup tomorrow, and I think Justin was mentioning this when they play Gonzaga, I'm a big Kelvin Sampson fan because, he coached Oklahoma for years. But this guy, Sampson's, he's a tough-minded coach, but he's a very good defensive coach, and the Cougars defend really well. So you can go in there and have a good flow, but when you meet them, with their speed on defense, their aggressiveness, it can kind of knock you off it knocks you off kilter because you're not, until you see it, you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. And the different, I was talking about the NBA playoffs with the 7-game series. See, if you're playing a team like Houston in a 7-game series, the first game it might catch you by surprise because maybe you're not used to the physicality or their aggressiveness on defense. But in a 7-game series, with each passing game, it allows you to be able to adjust to what you're seeing. But in the tournament, what makes it so cool is it's a one-game situation. So if you come out and you spend the first 10 minutes, of a game and you get yourself in a hole, it could cost you the game. In an NBA playoff series, you get hit in a game or you get blasted in game one, you still have time to adjust and get back in the series. But that's what makes the tournament so cool is that you don't have time for that. Luckily, for Michigan State, they were able to battle back in that second half and go on a big run and get over on Ole Miss. But, that slow start to that game almost cost them. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, I'm most excited about this game tonight, Duke and Alabama. Alabama's a great offensive team. They hit 25 threes in their last game, but Duke's got the star power. They've got Cooper Flagg, and I'm sure for those of you who maybe didn't know a lot about Cooper Flagg before this year at Duke, you watch him play and you can see why everyone's salivating over him. He's got size. He's got the shooting ability. What I'm really seeing now is his playmaking ability. He can get to any spot on the floor to get his shot up, but his anticipatory passing and his feel for the game is terrific. So I'm just having a lot of fun watching Cooper Flagg, play and just trying to visualize what he would look like in a Trailblazer uniform. That's how good he is. So I'm pretty excited about that game tonight. That's going to be a good one, Duke and Alabama. 25 threes. Bama set the tournament mark. You would expect maybe chances are that those numbers will come back down a little bit, but I'm sure that's something that Duke's paying attention to going into that game. But both teams now, the Florida line's up to 7.5, and Duke is a 7.5-point favorite as well. But that's what we got. That's a big-time matchup. That's one of those games where the winner of that game could go on to win the championship. And then Auburn's done a good job. They peaked early. A lot of people thought they might flame out in the tournament, but they've kind of picked things back up. I'm a big Bruce Pearl fan, and so I want to see him have success. I think he's a great coach. But that coaching matchup, you don't get much better than that. Tom Izzo and Bruce Pearl. So there you have it. There's my tournament history lesson through the eyes of Chad. But it's amazing how these sporting events, when I first started getting into sports, it started out with Oklahoma football, and I saw them win a national championship. Then I was exposed to the NBA Finals with Bird and Magic. And then from there, you start to pick up on other things. It was a great time for sports back in the the early 80s when I was younger because, we had great quarterbacks in the NFL. Oklahoma under Barry Switzer was a terrific football program. Billy Tubbs produced a very exciting brand of basketball at Oklahoma. And then with these other ancillary sports, like, I got to see Jack win, the 86 Masters. And then in tennis, you had all the greats like John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, Boris Becker, all these guys, Yvonne Lindell. And so I was just, going throughout the sports calendar, just getting exposed to all these different things. It was mind-blowing to me. And so it's been fun to see how those things progress. But I think that game tonight, Bama and Duke's going to be a heck of a one. And with Cooper Flagg, I don't really have a comp for him. And it's easy to say Larry Bird because he's an American-born white, and we haven't had a great one like that since Larry Bird. But I don't really have a comp for him. I heard, maybe it was Dan Patrick, someone said Kevin Durant based on his body style and the way he can get to his spots and make shots. But I don't really have a comp for, Cooper Flagg. He's unique. But I do remember what Ben Golliver told me when I talked to him last year when he was at the trials for Team USA. I mean, Golliver was blown away by how well Cooper Flagg was competing against the NBA talent and how he was, having success and having his way at times against the NBA talent, which, I mean, you don't see that too often from a young player. But Flagg's body is strong. He should still be, technically a senior in high school. Yeah, he's a unique player. And so I'm anxious to see what he's going to do once he hits the NBA. And the fact that he's so young and he'll have a chance to grow into his body and grow into his game. It's going to be terrific. The other thing I'm getting ready to do, too, is at this Celtics city. It's been produced by Bill Simmons. I've been saving and waiting to sit down and watch. But I've been hearing stories from Michael Cooper and these others who were part of that era. And I can't wait to sit down and digest it. And I've been enjoying Bill Simmons' podcast. Of all the people that cover the NBA, Russillo and Simmons talking NBA, I think, is one of my favorites right now on YouTube. Because those two guys, they really love the game, and they watch a lot of the games, and Simmons goes to a lot of games in person. But I've really gotten into it of late as we're getting closer to the postseason, so I've just enjoyed his, breakdowns. And, he was a lot of fun, post-Luka trade, too. But, yeah, I would say that, Bill Simmons has been great. But he's a big Celtic fan. I didn't know this until the other day, but he grew up, his dad had a single ticket, season ticket for the Celtics. And so he would go, and then once, Bill was old enough to where he could have his own seat, then they got a second one. And so he was able to go to Celtic games at the Garden and was there for the entire Bird era. And, I wish I could go back and relive some of those games. Larry Bird was so much fun to watch. But those Celtic teams with Bird, Parrish, and McHale, it's amazing how Red was able to acquire those players. And then they acquired Dennis Johnson. And then you had that starting five of Ainge, Johnson, Parrish, Bird, and McHale. And then on the other side, you had the Lakers with Magic, Scott, Kareem, Worthy, and Green. AC Green out of Oregon State. And so it was just that was my exposure to the NBA. And then there in Denver, the local team at the time had Alex English, who was the best scorer in the 80s in the entire league. So I was fortunate when I was younger with what I got exposed to. I really enjoyed it. All right, we'll keep things rolling here live at Spirit Mountain Casino. Michael Holton going to join us to talk some hoop coming up at 3 o'clock. I'll be on air until 4. And if you want to jump on board, 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. 503-248-0620 is your telephone number. Hope you're enjoying your afternoon. And hopefully the weather's better out there right now than when it was when I came in. It was, kind of gloomy and spitting rain. Not a big fan of that. And 2 weeks left in the NBA regular season. 2 weeks from tomorrow is when it all comes to an end, and then we get ready for the postseason. Michael Holton coming up at 3. Chad doing live at Spirit Mountain Casino. Your place to bet on college sports. Games starting at 3:09 today, and then we've got the Pot of Gold drawings at 7 o'clock. This is very good news, but the Godfather, his wife Nancy, has reached out, and we are now set for the couples Chapman out at Willamette Valley Country Club coming up on May 31st and June 1st. And hopefully this year the weather will be a little more cooperative on day 2 of the tournament, but it's now that point in time in the year where I can start making golf plans, which is really nice. Looking forward to having more time to be able to play golf and enjoy that. So I like Willamette Valley Country Club. It's a really nice course. I like that. I'm just looking forward to get out and playing golf. And just got a couple of more weeks, and then the golf season will begin. And hopefully we'll have some extended nice weather in April and May like we did last year. Last couple of years it's been nice. It's provided some very good morning golf, which has been good. And I've noticed where the days are getting longer, where we're at a situation now where the sun is out, and it's getting darker later. So this is a great time of the year. If you want to jump on board, 503-248-0620. That's your telephone number. Michael Holton is going to join us coming up and be a part of the show at 3 o'clock. Want to get his take on the tournament, what it's like to be a part of that, what it's like to play in a Final Four, the pressure, what some of the things he remembers from that, and going up against a great Louisville squad. But he played for one of the all-time greats. Larry Brown is one of the best basketball coaches of all time. So, Holton, that's pretty cool to have an opportunity to play for him. So we'll get Holton's take on the tournament, and then we'll talk to him about the Trailblazers tomorrow, how they bounce back from that subpar performance against Sacramento, where they lacked the, kind of the energy and the focus, and they just weren't locked in. And that's going to happen from time to time, especially with a young team. But, for the Blazers, if they're going to have a chance against the Knicks, they're going to have to match their intensity level. And the one thing about the Knicks is that when they lace them up, they come ready to go. That's an aggressive group. They get after it. So we'll talk with Michael Holton coming up at 3. And if you're coming down, that's a good idea. The Sportsbook is a great setup down here. They got the cushy seats, a lot of open seating, so you can hang out and watch the games. But then they've got good food options. 10 Barrel Brewing, which is right across the way, is a great place to grab some grub and get a brew. And you can come over here in the Sportsbook and be able to watch the games. And they got the video wall and everything set up. If there's a different event or a game and it's not on a screen, you can ask for it and they'll put it on for you. So they've got access to whatever you would want. All right, here's the Dodger fan responding to Aaron Judge and his greatness today. Take away the home runs from Judge, and what do you have? Well, that's the thing, is that you can't take away the home runs from Judge. I feel bad for Judge because he dropped the ball in the World Series, and it was a bad look at the time. But you can't take anything away from Judge. And no one argues Shohei Ohtani. He's a phenomenal player who can do so many different things. But, when you have a guy that can mash like Aaron Judge, that's a great tool to have. I just like Aaron Judge. I'm down. I like watching him. He's big and powerful and can swing the stick. And he's a very likable guy. Shohei is a terrific player. I like watching him play. I like watching the Dodgers play because of all the great players they have. They had a big come-from-behind win yesterday. So we'll see how things continue to shake out. The Dodgers, I just think they're going to hit 117 wins this year. They're going to surpass the Mariners in 2001. And that's no disrespect to the Mariners. I just think the Dodgers, they're so talented and so loaded that it's hard to imagine they're not going to be able to find a way to get it done. That's kind of how I see it. The Mariners got shut out last night by the Athletics 7-0. So they are 1-1 on the year, but the Dodgers, they've won their first couple of games at home, including the first couple of games in the Tokyo series. But I think when it's all said and done, I think their win total set in Vegas at 104. There's just no reason to believe that the Dodgers won't surpass that number and then make a run at 117. It all comes down to health and then their motivation as the season continues, because they're going to be so out in front in the NL West that you got to wonder, can they keep their focus level for 162? How badly do they want it? I just think when you got a roster like this and the type of talent they have, and they got the pitching, I mean, if you're going to continue to win games, they're going to win, most series, you might as well make a run at history and do something no one's done before. Make a run for it and see what you can do. But the Dodgers last night, like their lineup, the Dodgers lineup, it's it's pretty absurd. Like last night, they had production from multiple places. Otani was 1 of 4. Betts had a big night, had a couple of home runs, 3 hits, 3 runs. And Betts, keep in mind, was coming off the illness where he dropped like 20 pounds, but he was able to be ready to go for opening day. They had a couple of RBIs from Freddie Freeman. Teoscar Hernandez went hitless, but had a homer in his opening game. Muncy went hitless. Edmonds stepped up and produced with a hit and a run. And, oh, by the way, they had Conforto out there. He had an RBI, had a hit and a run. And then they've got guys on the bench like Austin Barnes. And Will Smith was able to come in and pinch hit and produce an RBI. It's just not fair. They're loaded up. And then they got the pitching as well. So it's like whatever you want, they've got. Yamamoto got the start last night. 5 hits in 5 innings. Gave up 2 earned runs. 10 strikeouts. When I saw Yamamoto, I saw him, he had injury problems last year, but I saw him before he got hurt last year in New York, and he was terrific in that game at Yankee Stadium. But just the velocity, the speed, and what he was able to provide, like you could see the talent. And it's pretty obvious what the Dodgers are amassing right now. But that's what's going to be fun to watch as the season progresses. Can they stay healthy, especially with their arms? And if so, will they make a run at 117? My guess is yes. I think they will. And Aaron Judge, for those of you who are just joining me, 3 home runs today, missed number 4 just by a couple of inches. It hit the wall. And, of course, the mark for most home runs in a game is 4. And that's been done by 18 different players over the course of history in Major League Baseball. So there you have it. I wanted him to get 4. I mean, that's a pretty elite group right there. I mean, 18 is not a very big number when you consider how long they've been playing baseball. I mean, a long, long time. So we shall see. But I think I've narrowed in on the series I'll go to. Yankees, Dodgers, Dodger Stadium at the end of May, beginning of June. And then I think what I'll do is what I did last time, just extend it out a day, and that will give me a chance to go down and do a full day at Disneyland. But I like Dodger Stadium. It's really nice. And if you stay in downtown, I Uber up to the stadium, and then I just walk back. It's, probably about a 25-minute walk back to downtown to the hotel. But, of course, it's nice down there. I like the walk. I just don't like waiting in traffic. Like, it gives me anxiety. And I don't like waiting behind a bunch of people trying to get an Uber ride out of a big stadium. But, yeah, Dodger Stadium's great. And there are other stadiums like I want to go check out. Like Pittsburgh would be nice. I have not been to that crib yet, but there are other places around. I've never been to Fenway. I've been to Yankee Stadium a couple times. But I like traveling to see different baseball stadiums. All right, we'll come back. Michael Holton will join us. We'll talk hoop with him. He's played in the Final Four. What's that like? And then how do the Blazers bounce back and give a better effort against the Knicks tomorrow in New York? We'll talk about it next. Rip City Drive special Saturday edition from Spirit Mountain Casino. A beautiful place to hang out in the sports book to watch basketball. You can get in on the action. Your place to bet on college sports. Great places to eat down here, dining options. They've got the Top Golf Suite, everything you need to spend a Saturday or a Sunday or an entire weekend and enjoy your time. All right, we'll come back and talk with Mike Holton here on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, live here at Spirit Mountain Casino, getting ready for the Elite Eight. Your place to bet on college sports. Inside the sports book, a special Saturday edition of the Rip City Drive. And I'm very happy to go to the phones, and I'm joined by someone I get to work with, former Trailblazer, former UCLA Bruin, and current radio and television analyst for your Blazers, Michael Holton. Hey, Coach, how much do you enjoy watching college basketball now that you're older? You've coached college basketball. You played at a high level at UCLA. How much do you enjoy the game now?
Well, I enjoy it a lot. I'm a big fan of March Madness. I don't get to watch college basketball as much as I like because the NBA takes up, most of my time. But I'm a big fan of the NCAA tournament.
Well, what was the different items that you remember? Because you had a chance to play for arguably the best coach of all time, or one of the best, and Larry Brown. But what were some of the things that you learned from him about tournament play and how to have success in the pressure-packed NCAA tournament?
I think as I look back, Chad, the biggest thing is to appreciate every moment because you don't know if you're going to make it back. Because I went and played for a national championship as a freshman, and we never made it back to the Final Four. And so Larry Brown was smart to let us know, hey, appreciate this, lock in, focus, enjoy it, understand it. So I think that helped me throughout every other NCAA tournament experience I had because, the 5 years at UCLA with Steve Lavin, we went to 5 tournaments, 3 Sweet 16s, and 2 Elite Eights as a coach.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, it's probably crazy when you're a freshman and all of a sudden it all happens so quickly where you reach a championship and you got a chance to win a national championship. But what are some of the images or moments or things that you remember about that incredible run?
So what I remember was, because we were a low seed getting in, one of the last teams into the field, so we had to play almost what they could now call like one of the first 4, and we beat Old Dominion. And then we played the top seed in the tournament in DePaul with Mark Aguirre and Terry Cummings and Clyde Bradshaw. And so we had this tough road where every game we played was a huge game, and we were a huge underdog. I just remember that, that. And then you go and you pack. You're told that you have to pack for 2 games, but you're going to play 1 game, and if you lose, you're going home. So you're packing for 2. Your mind is that 2, but you can only think about 1 because it's single elimination. So that struck me as a freshman, like, well, why am I packing for 2 games? And so I didn't pack for 2 games. I packed for 1 game, and we won. And so now my mom, who came to the game, hey, Mom, I need you to take me shopping. I don't have clothes for the game. I mean, it's just weird little things that are nuanced about single elimination tournament play.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, did you know, when was it as a group that you guys started to feel like or realize you had a chance to make a run? Was it after the win over DePaul, or was it later in your run, maybe against Ohio State or Clemson? Like, at what point did you know that you guys had something special?
Well, I think after we beat DePaul, because they were the top team in the country, I think we felt like, well, then we can beat anybody. And then there was that part where you were playing with house money, so to speak, because you weren't supposed to be there. You weren't supposed to beat DePaul. And so now it was – and Larry Brown had a way of keeping us in the moment. So all we looked at was, I believe the next game was Ohio State. We didn't look at the fact that they had Kelvin Ramsey and Herb Williams and Clark Kellogg. I mean, these guys are incredible players. And we just locked into the game, and we went out and we beat them. And now you get to the next weekend. And what I think is so unique about the NCAA tournament, Chad, is you only have to win 2 games to be in the Sweet 16.
That's
but
right.
While you've been in tournament play, your high school tournament, you've been in AAU tournaments, you've been in a lot of tournaments. You've never been in a tournament where you win 2 games and the next weekend you're in a different part of the country, and the next weekend you're in a different part of the country. It's just different.
Yeah, that had to be pretty wild. What was that like? Do you remember thinking, like, because all of a sudden you're playing in the Final Four, you're at Market Square Arena, so you're in, one of the hotbeds of basketball at Indiana playing for a championship. Like, did you take a moment, in all the hoopla to be like, wow, this is pretty awesome?
No, I don't think when you're in it and you're that young, right, you have perspective.
Yeah.
You're just like, hey, I want to be on my game. I want to play the best I can play. I don't want to embarrass myself or my family. I want to bring value to the team. I want to lock into the game plan. You know, you're just trying to be that player on a team doing everything that a good locked-in player on a team does, which is be ready to play when they throw it up.
We're talking with Michael Holton, former Trailblazer, former UCLA Bruin, here on a Saturday edition of the Rip City Drive. Larry Brown, I have such great respect for. I mean, he had success everywhere he went. When you were coaching during the course of your career, how many things did you take from Larry Brown that maybe you didn't realize at the time that you realized later that you were implementing in your own coaching strategies? Because he was phenomenal.
Yeah, a lot. And the two that stand out the most are practice planning and being clear with players about roles. You know, I think one of the things that Larry Brown did better than most coaches was he identified your role. Because most coaches say things like, hey, I'm going to treat everybody the same, you know, everything is equal, and it's really not. And it's really not true. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
that's poppycock.
The guy that's a fifth-year senior that's leading the team in scoring can be 5 minutes late to the bus. He's not going to get treated the same way that the freshman is 5 minutes late to the bus on his first road trip. I mean, and just read between the lines of what I'm trying to say, that roles are different. So if you're a guy coming off the bench, you know, you got to be ready. You're looking at different things. Okay, when I come in and I'm coming in for that player, then I'm going to be guarding this position, so I need to make sure I watch, study, come in. So my role is different than the guy I'm sitting next to. So our jobs aren't the same.
No, that's 100% correct. Now, now you've shared this before, but it's a great story, and I want you to share it again. When you talk about being very clear on defining roles for the players, walk us through the conversation he had with you and what he wanted you to do if you were going to be a starter on his basketball team.
You love this story that is self-deprecating.
It's the best, man.
So Larry Brown called me into his office my freshman year, and we were 8-6, and there had just been a cover story in Sports Illustrated by Curry Kirkpatrick, and the title was "The Bruins Are in Ruins," and the subtitle was, "This is arguably the worst team in UCLA basketball history." And so Coach Brown, in that climate, decided, hey, I got to do this my way. I'm going to bench these guys that I didn't recruit. I'm going to bench the seniors. I'm going to start these freshmen. So he calls me in and he says, hey, Michael, I'm thinking about starting you, and here's your role. I need you to defend and run the team. And I said, okay, what about offense, Coach? I mean, you know, I'm a high school All-American, 27 points a game. He said, yeah, I need you to run the team and defend. And I said, no, I got it, but what about offense, Coach? He said, look, I'm talking to you about a role that's going to make you a starter. If you don't want the role, the alternative is you don't play. And I said, Coach, I can defend and run this team. And so I became a starter with the weight of the world on every shot I took, because I wasn't green-lighted to score. He gave me so I asked the third time, Coach, look, I just want to be clear about offense. And then he was irritated, and he said, look, you can shoot if your man falls down.
That's so good. Now, Michael, now at the time you were probably like, hey, in your mind, I know what you're thinking. Like, hey, I can score. I'm an All-American. I know what I'm doing. But in retrospect, when you look back, was he right about the role that he defined for you?
Yes, because it worked, and we ended up playing for a national championship. Even though I'm not the reason, but I feel like he gave everybody a role, and then the pieces fit. But, Chad, I didn't really appreciate Larry Brown doing that until I followed him into his other jobs. When he went to Philadelphia and coached Allen Iverson, I went, and I watched every minute of the training camp, and I watched him coach Allen Iverson into a role by putting the ball in the hands of Eric Snow. And he told Allen Iverson, if you bring it up and shoot every time, nobody else is going to defend, screen, or rebound, and we have no chance. And so I watched him do that with other teams. So when I became a coach, I was confident that the way in which I thought the pieces need to fit, I needed to communicate clearly.
Gosh, that's so good. Now, you mentioned something about practice plans. What were the keys you learned from Coach Brown on practice plans?
Well, watching him plan practice, I realized that you don't waste a minute. You don't waste a single minute. Because practice, you have a finite amount of practice time, and basically each team has the same amount. So if I've got the gym for 2 hours and 15 minutes, that's all I have. And so between John Wooden and how he planned practice and Larry Brown, I watched Larry Brown never waste a minute. Once he started practice, he never stopped the group as a whole. In other words, he would let the guards have a water break, but the big guys had to practice shooting. And then the big guys could get water while the guards practice shooting. But he never let everybody come to a standstill throughout the practice.
That's amazing. There's another story I want you to share, because I don't think you've shared this one on air, but you've told me off air before, and I love this story. But it involves Kobe Bryant, and I think you were on campus at UCLA, and I think you were walking across campus. But like you often did, you would pass through the gym to check out and see what players, because a lot of NBA players would show up to put in work during the off season. And you said one thing was going on one end of the court, but on the other end, separated by a curtain, there was one guy doing some work. What'd you see?
Chad, you got a great memory. Story's a little different. So, no, what happened was in the summer, all of the pros were playing pickup basketball in the men's gym, the best pickup games in the country, in my opinion, right? And so I knew that, right, that, hey, all the pros are playing pickup. So while I'm cutting through the Poly Pavilion, going back to my office, I see Kobe in Poly Pavilion with his trainer. And so I just grab a seat. I'm going, wait a minute, I want to watch this. I mean, everybody's playing pickup in the men's gym. What's Kobe doing here? Man, I watched Kobe Bryant stretch every limb. I watched him shoot, with one hand and the other hand and pick a spot. I watched Kobe Bryant work from spots on the floor and perfect his release angle, his fall away, his lean, his balance in one spot for 10, 20 minutes. And then another spot, and then another spot. I sat there for an hour and a half, and I'm going, I've never seen anything like this in my life. In that he was such a specialist about every nuance of balance and angles of shot releases, and he practiced them.
So when you saw that, it was striking from the standpoint that you had literally never seen that type of detail in an individual workout at all.
No, and I hadn't. And I'd seen a lot of workouts, and I'd worked people out, and I'd been worked out. But I'd never seen anybody slow the game down like that. And somebody else, and I haven't really watched him work out, but I think he works out in a similar way, is Damian Lillard. Dame doesn't play pickup in the offseason. I thought
he doesn't. No pickup. I thought he did too. He doesn't.
No, when Dame was here, and I had conversations with people around him on his security team, they said, no, Dame doesn't play pickup. So Dame, every offseason, perfects what he wants to add to his game in the laboratory, so to speak, not in a competitive environment.
Interesting.
So that's a different level of professionalism that I saw in Kobe and that I later learned about Dame.
Okay, I've got another question for you about coaches, especially with the tournament right now. Like, tomorrow we got Tom Izzo going up against Bruce Pearl, which is a good coaching matchup. But you've been very blessed from the standpoint that you've been around some phenomenal coaches. You spent time with Coach Wooden, and you've been around, had a chance to play for Larry Brown. So you've been around some great coaches, and that's just to name two of them. But is there a common theme between all of the great coaches you've been around? Is there something that connects all of them together, or are each of them just different? Or is there a common theme with the greats?
There's a common theme, I think, that I've identified, and I love watching it in the tournament. And I heard it from the late Coach Wooden when he explained it. Coach Wooden was bothered when games were on television because he said that before games were on television, coaches sat down and players were able to just play. But he felt like television made actors out of coaches. Running up and down the sideline and all of the showmanship. Now, this was Coach Wooden's words. He said, Michael, I don't like – he said, the coach that's running up and down the sideline didn't do his job during the weekend practice, or his team would be prepared and he could sit down and enjoy the game. So when I watch teams in the tournament, I watch coaches. In terms of, is your team prepared and you're good? You sit there and maybe in a timeout, but or are you overly demonstrative because there's an emotional twist that you need to have to get your guys up to play, so to speak? Because one of the things about me, and one of the reasons why I wasn't a super effective head coach, is I was emotional during the game. I mean, and I called Coach Wooden. I said, hey, Coach, we just blew double-digit leads in 4 games. And he said, Michael, stop pressuring your team at the end of the game. Sit down and let them finish. And, Chad, I almost cried. I felt so convicted because it was so true. You know, I was like, you know, we're so close to victory. I gotta whip the horse across the finish line, so to speak. And that's a bad analogy to use. But Coach Wooden says, if you do your job during the week. So after he told me that, I started putting time and score in practice every day.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I heard Kelvin Sampson say it last night after their win. He said, we spend time on special situations every practice. He said, because in college, you can't call timeout and draw up a new play that they've never done. You got to have something already in your arsenal that you can go to. And so I just really believe that. And that's one of the things that I think is challenging about pros is that they don't have time to practice special situations.
Wow. You know what's amazing, Michael? When I hear you talk about your coaching experience, like it reminds me of my experience as a father, where it's like, you know, there are times where I really feel like my selfishness and my anger, like all of these weaknesses get exposed. And so it helps me to go back and refine. And it's pretty awesome that you had, you know, someone like Wooden who could point something out where you're able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, he's right. I've got to change this. You know, it's like you probably learned a lot about yourself through your coaching days.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's no growth without change, right?
Yeah.
But the problem, Chad, is some people think that all change is growth.
Right? That's true. And some change is not growth. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you know, that's why I think coaches, teachers, parents, pastors, people in leadership positions that are humble, right, are uniquely placed in life to help move other people forward. And it's one of the things I really like about coaching and the coaching dynamic and teaching, because to me, and Coach Wooden shared this with me, and it blew my mind. He said, Michael, I liked it when all coaches were teachers. He said, because now with the money and television, people come into the profession without the best interest of the sport at heart. He said, when I started coaching, coaches were your PE teacher. Coaches taught math at the school, and they got a stipend to coach the sport.
Yeah, in fact, I just had a conversation with Brad Barbrick, who coached for a long time, 25 years at Concordia. You know him well because your son played for him. But he told me that for most of his tenure there at Concordia, he was also a teacher in the classroom.
Yeah, and so you talk about I played for great coaches and I learned. Yeah, but Chad, I taught school 1 year. I taught 7th grade world history.
You did?
And language arts 1 year. My first
I did not know this.
In the City College. I was a teacher at Elliott Middle School in Altadena, California. And that year taught me everything I've ever done meaningful in life, because I had 7th graders. I had to do a lesson plan every week for the principal. It had to have benchmarks, objectives. And that lesson planning and classroom management with 12 and 13-year-olds taught me everything I needed to know about not being emotional, and about being clear, and about being consistent, and about nurturing.
How nerve-wracking was that? Did you enjoy it, or was that really hard teaching that year?
No, well, it was hard because I'm not the sharpest crayon in the box, right? So for me to be the teacher, I had to have other teachers helped me stay a chapter ahead of the class, right? But Chad, the story in it, though, that was transformational for me was because I had to leave and run to practice at the city college. I needed my classroom to be clean at the end of the day because I didn't have time to sweep and clean it, and it was a requirement that you couldn't leave without the classroom being clean. So one day I see this girl, and she's eating sunflower seeds and throwing them on the floor. And I'm
my
looking,
gosh.
And to me, that just means I'm going to be late to practice. And so I lost it. I was like, hey, stop. Everybody, move your desk back. Pick up those sunflower seeds. What are you doing? I embarrassed a 13-year-old girl in front of her classmates.
Wow.
Chad, she jumped up and cussed me out.
Wow.
And ran out of the classroom. And it became such a transformational experience because all the kids were like, ooh, she cussed you out. She cussed you out. And I said, yeah, she's having a bad day. They said, you're the one that got cussed out. I said, yeah, but nothing she said describes who I am.
Huh, interesting.
So now I write the referral. She gets suspended. She comes back. And the whole class is in the hallway when she comes back to the room like I'm going to slap her or something, right? Because that's the world of a seventh grader. And so I was able to, A, learn don't embarrass another human being in front of people, B, be able to apologize and course correct, and C, don't let your care and concern for another human being get disrupted by your ego or pride.
Wow. So what was the follow-up conversation like with this young lady, and what was the relationship like with her in the classroom after that moment?
So when I saw her, I asked her if she had materials. Did she need a pencil? Did she need paper? And everything was fine. And so I thought the lesson that you don't have to overreact when somebody says something offensive. You don't have to fight. And at that age, everybody's like, oh, there's going to be a fight after school because this person said this to that person. I was able to use that experience because everybody in the school knew about it. And everybody in the school was aware of my background in terms of sports and professional basketball. So I was able to model a proper response versus a reaction.
Wow. We're talking with Michael Holton on Hoops here on the Rip City Drive Saturday edition. One other question about Coach Brown. Because he was successful at many different stops, college, pro, over many different years. And I'm wondering, what was his secret sauce for being able to connect with different players through different eras in different situations?
And, I thought his ability to get you to understand that basketball was a simple game and that it was executing fundamental skills under pressure and that you needed to perfect and polish your fundamental skills. And that you needed to build that as your base and that you needed to play hard and be unselfish. I mean, those are the things that he built into any team he played on, that you needed to be fundamentally sound, you needed to play hard, and you needed to be unselfish on and off the floor.
Now, have you talked to Coach Billups about Larry Brown, and do you see any concepts that you recognize that maybe Billups picked up from Coach Brown when he played for him that he's using with the Trailblazers now?
Yeah, I recognize them, and I've had a couple of conversations with Coach Billups about it. Keep in mind that when Coach Brown coached Chauncey in Detroit, I was there. I went to that training camp from the first minute to the last.
Oh, you did?
And took contemporaneous notes because I followed Larry Brown wherever he went. And when he was in the pros, I would always go to training camp, and I would study everything he did, the way he did it. So I watched him coach Chauncey. I watched everything that went with that. Sometimes they butted heads in training camp. Sometimes there was understanding. But I watched the same thing with Allen Iverson and Larry Brown. And so Chauncey and I have had a couple of interactions about it, have not talked extensively about it. But I know that Larry Brown's a part of Chauncey Billups' coaching foundation and philosophy.
Gosh, that's awesome, man. That's so cool. I do have one more question for you in regards to the game tomorrow. Coach Billups was very clear after the game that the team did not show up ready to compete and do all the little things in the margins that they have to be able to win games. And he also thought that Sacramento was the aggressor. So What's the key for Portland to bounce back and at least match the physicality that they're certainly going to see against the Knicks tomorrow?
Well, I mean, I think we've seen this movie before in that the team has had some games in Chauncey Billups' tenure where the effort wasn't where it needed to be, and he's handled it different ways at different times. I think now he's at a point in his coaching career where he's instructive. Hey, guys, if you don't play hard enough, this is what happens, and this is what it looks like. So I'm sure the team will be locked in and focused, and effort won't be a concern against the Knicks.
Yeah.
But the thing about pro basketball, Chad, is the other team shows up and they don't have to cooperate.
They don't care about your process. That's right.
Yeah, they got their process. And that's what I love about pro sports, or about basketball in general, is it's always a live competitive event. I think the Blazers will play hard. I think they'll play well. But will they be able to dictate the terms of engagement to the Knicks in Madison Square Garden? Well, that's why you buy a ticket. You got to see. We got to see that.
Well, Michael, I just want to say that I thank you for coming on today because I enjoy our conversations. But today is one of my favorites, and this is why I love conversation, because I just learned like 5 or 6 different things I had never heard from you before, or different stories, and so I found it all to be awesome. And that story in the classroom was terrific. So thank you for coming on, because we just worked our way through the conversation, and I ended up learning more things about you. And you've told me a lot of stories, but you got some good ones today, man. That was great.
Well, I appreciate you, Chad, and I've been richly blessed with mentorship, and I appreciate that you find something that in what I have to share to want other people to hear. So let's just continue to move the ball down the field.
Okay, you got it, my friend. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, Michael.
All right, buddy. Bye.
There you go. That's Holton on Hoops right there, Michael Holton. Man, he's got great stories, and he's been around some great coaches and players, but I learned some things today. I did not know he taught 7th grade for a year. Holy crap. All right, we're going to keep things rolling. This is a great song, by the way. West End Girls. Din, 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 din. My boy Steve would tell me that this reminds him of Iceland when he was stationed in the military. All right, we'll keep things rolling here. I'm live at Spirit Mountain Casino getting ready for the Elite 8. Big thanks to Michael Holton. That was a fun conversation. If you want to jump on board, 503-248-0620. You got the Saturday edition of the Rip City Drive on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, this right here. Crank this, Shaq. This is some good music right here. A good friend of mine, Todd, he exposed me to this song a long time ago. And I've always been a George Benson fan, but like a lot of things, as time has gone on, you start to look into certain artists and different music, and this song just goes on, and it's just it's like a smorgasbord of greatness with his work with the guitar. I've never seen George Benson in concert before, but I would sure love to. It's songs like this where I listen to, I'm like, how can one human being be so good at the guitar? You ever come across certain artists like that? Like this right here, this is an artist. Like what is it Michael Holden says about a basketball player sometimes? He's at peace with his game. Well, George Benson's at peace with his game right now. Like he has become one with the guitar, and now they're just, well, this is what you get, greatness. He's just freestyling, man. So I love that. My Latin Brother. That's what that song is from George Benson. All right. I'm like some type of old person. I got my vitamins out right now. I got to carry vitamins around with me every day to make sure I get my vitamins in. And one thing, I don't know if maybe some of you have tried this, but I've lately, over the last couple of years, like I've really boosted my vitamin C levels to ridiculous levels. Like I'm getting like probably minimum 8,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C. But what I've noticed with the vitamin C intake is that obviously I do it for my immune system to avoid getting the colds or whatever. Because when you work in radio, like you got a lot of things against you. First off, the studios traditionally that I've worked in, there's like 1950 air that's been trapped in there for like 50 years. The studio I'm at iHeart's actually not too bad, but some of these studios are they're like dark basements, and it's like it smells like ass, and it's got like air from like 1950, and so you know that when you're breathing, it's like this cannot be good for me. And then people bring in germs, and then they can't escape, and then you get sick because of other people. But I've started boosting the vitamin C. I don't like to be sick on air because your voice and the congestion, it's just a big bowl of wrong. But I've started boosting my vitamin C, and not only does it help with the immunities, but it helps with my mood. Have you noticed that with the impact of vitamin C? So anyways, like right now, this is what I got. I carry this stuff around, and I refuse to get one of those like long, things where you have like, it's got like the M and the T and, for the different days of the week. Like I'm not going to go full on like blue hair with my vitamins. So I just have these prescription bottles where I just put all my vitamins in for the day and I carry it around. But like I've got this supplement here to help with the liver, and to keep the liver nice and clean so it can, metabolize fat. I've got my fish oils. I've got an antioxidant, which is supposed to help protect from the free radicals, which we have bumping around in the environment. I've got a probiotic. And then what is this one here? Oh, a digestive enzyme. And then I got my vitamin C. And then I just, every 3 hours, 4 hours when I have a meal or whatever, then I bust out the vitamins and hit that. So there you go. But I'm like an old guy. Plus I want to try and hold off the doctors as long as possible. So I figure if I go overboard on the vitamins and the exercise and stuff, maybe I can prevent, having to go see the doctor. I don't like going to the doctor. But I love my doctor. She's awesome. I don't like male doctors. Like that's not my thing. So I went through a clinic close to where I live, and I found the most beautiful doctor I could. And then I was like, okay, that's my, what do they call it? Your homeroom doctor, or what do they call that? Your primary doctor. And so I've been going to her and stuff, but I don't like going to the doctor. I hate going to the dentist. I don't, that makes me uncomfortable. So I try to do everything I can to prevent from spending more time at the dentist or the doctor. But I know that I'm up. It's time for me to get, what was it? Tony told me you got the prostate. I got more exams coming up I don't want to do. But I know you got to do it in order to make sure you're still good or whatever, but that kind of stuff's annoying. My mom's birthday is coming up next week, I think on April 2nd. So whatever day that is, but she's going to be, I think, 78, 79. My parents are getting older, too. Everything's changing. But that's okay. That's part of life. All right, so I'm here at Spirit Mountain Casino. Right over my shoulder is the giant screen with the game going on. So right now, Texas Tech's got the early 24-23 lead on Florida. And this has been a chalk tournament. So we'll see. I mentioned it before, but we haven't had all 4 number 1 seeds into the Final Four since 2008. So we'll see if that's going to be the case this year. But, Texas Tech survived Arkansas, had a remarkable comeback in that game, won it in overtime, and now here they are taking on one of the best teams in the country in Florida. So we'll see how things shake out. But I'm more excited about the second game today. This is a good one, but I think Duke and Alabama is going to be awesome. Alabama's coming off a game where they shot lights out from 3 with 25 of them. And we'll see how, Duke is able to, limit some of the offensive potency of Alabama. That's going to be awesome. I guess, look, I'm not a Duke fan, but I'm a Cooper Flagg fan, and I like to watch great players. So I do want Duke to advance into the Final Four, so don't hate me for that. But most of the people I know, they especially guys around my age, they've grown up hating Duke for so long that they can't even embrace Duke being in the Final Four, even though they have Cooper Flagg and it would be fun to watch. And I get that, man. Duke's annoying. Their fan base is annoying. But Cooper Flagg is awesome. And I want to see how he handles, the stage tonight against Bama, because against Arizona, he was under control. Decision-making was good. You can see the athleticism. He's a playmaker. He's got some anticipatory passing that's really nice. I don't understand how a young guy can be so poised and look that good. He's a special one. He is really good. So we'll see how things shake out. But come on down to Spirit Mountain Casino. I'm telling you, if you haven't been to the sportsbook yet, you'll love it down here. And for those of you who don't know, you can't do it through DraftKings with the Oregon Lottery. But here at Spirit Mountain Casino, you can bet on college sports. So that means NCAA tournament. So you can come down and hit the Elite Eight or the Final Four, which we're going to have on the 5th and the 7th of April. And then, of course, during college football, you come down and, you can get in your wagers on Oregon State and Oregon and any other college football action you want. And, I can smell it right now. 10 Barrel Brewing's got some good food working right now. You can get a nice little brew and be able to kick back and relax and watch the games. And it's, they got the big open seats, too, with the cushy chairs, which is nice. Big thanks to Michael Holton. I really enjoyed that conversation. And, can you imagine? I mean, some of the coaches, he had a chance to hang out with John Wooden and learn from him. He played for Larry Brown, had a chance to be around Steve Lavin. That's pretty awesome. I didn't have time. I wanted to get into some details about what are some of the things he learned about that Pistons team that Chauncey won a championship with. It would have been pretty sweet to see, to hear some of the stories about that. When he was at camp that year before they won the title, did he see indications during that camp that they were going to be something special? Because that team just absolutely destroyed the Lakers. That was crazy. It was weird to watch Shaq and Kobe just get annihilated like that. And that was the one year where Karl Malone had a chance to win a title, and he couldn't get over the hump. Remember that team? Gary Payton, Karl Malone, and he had Shaq and Kobe. And that was the year. That playoff series, gosh, that was a good one. The 6-gamer they won against San Antonio, where Derek Fisher hit the the point 4? Is that what it was? Yeah, point 4 against the Spurs in Game 5. Hit that. That tilted the series to the Lakers, and they went back and won it in 6. And that's when Kobe was flying back and forth between L.A. and Eagle, Colorado, for his court case, and still dominating in the playoff series. But that Game 5 was crazy because Tim Duncan hit that stupid shot where he was falling down, and it went in, and there was point 4 on the clock, and then Derek Fisher floated that shot up in for swish. And remember, it was point 4, so he had just enough time to catch and shoot. If it was point 3, it'd have to be, isn't it point 3 or less? It's a tip-in or nothing? I think the Trent Tucker shot for the Knicks, that's when they changed the rule. When he hit this ridiculous shot, they changed it to where you have to have point, what's the number? Is it point 3 or is it point 4? But there's that, I think point 3 is the cutoff where it's got to be, when does a shot have to be a tip-in? I think it's point 3. Oh, yeah. It looks like about point 2 or point 1. Yeah, the tip-in rule. What is the tip and roll? I can't remember. Is it 0.3? No, whatever. I can't remember the exact number. I think it's 0.3, but Fisher had just enough time on the clock to get the shot up, which is pretty amazing. All right, we'll keep things rolling here. Live at Spirit Mountain Casino. The Elite Eight is underway. 2 games today, 2 games tomorrow, and this is your place to bet on college sports. But I do appreciate your time today on this special Saturday edition of the Rip City Drive. I'll be back down here next Saturday and down here for title game night too. So come down and join me here at Spirit Mountain Casino, your place to bet on college sports. All right, Texas Tech, a 3-point lead on Florida in the first half. We've got Elite Eight action going on right now. And then the game coming up next will be Alabama and Duke, with the Blue Devils being favored by 7.5. And then tomorrow, two more good matchups tomorrow on the Sunday, Tennessee and Houston. And I'll pull for Houston because I like Kelvin Sampson. And then you got Michigan State and Auburn. A great coaching matchup there with Tom Izzo and Bruce Pearl. And I like Bruce Pearl. He's cool. And Travis has experience with him and said that Bruce is cool. So I'm down with Bruce Pearl. And I like Tom Izzo, too. I told you yesterday, I when I saw him enter that room in Georgia with that superstar camp that was going on with Adidas, Tom Izzo, shorter than everybody else, but commanded more presence than anybody else. I've never seen anything like it. Like, he walked in, and it wasn't like some short guys. It wasn't like short man disease or anything like that. He just, you could tell that, yeah, I'm Tom Izzo. It was cool, and so I really respect him a great deal. And I heard an interview with him a couple of days ago. Tom Izzo still loves coaching, too. Like, really enjoying what he's doing, enjoys teaching. Obviously loves Michigan State, but he's still doing a heck of a job. I mean, right now Florida's battled back. They've got a 1-point lead at 32-31. So this should be a good game. Florida's been good throughout the course of the year. And, props to the SEC. After a rough start to the tournament, they've had, the best of their best really show up. I mean, Florida's been great. Alabama was sensational in their last game. Tennessee's been one of the big surprises. And Auburn's been one of the best teams throughout the entire season. So I like what I'm seeing there. So there you go. And then the Blazers tomorrow. Portland, here's their upcoming schedule. I mentioned I think it's probably got to be like, 4-1 on a road trip. They probably need to win 4 straight, to have a chance at the play-in there in that final week of the season. But the problem is, I don't know how this is going to work out on the road trip. Can they beat the Knicks tomorrow? That's going to be a tough one. But the rest of the road trip looks manageable. Atlanta on Tuesday, the Raptors on Thursday, and then Chicago on Friday. I mean, those you can manage that, and then you come home to face San Antonio before you make a road trip on Wednesday, the 9th, against the Utah Jazz. I mean, those are – it's not a daunting schedule, but tomorrow's game is going to be brutal, absolutely brutal tomorrow. The NBA, there were a couple of good games last night. By the way, the Kings are losing right now. They're in Orlando playing the Magic, and the Magic are up by 32 points. That's frustrating considering what we saw the other night with the Kings and Trailblazers. And then yesterday – the Nuggets ripped the Jazz. I mean, the Jazz are in full tank mode right now. Warriors topped the Pelicans. The Suns lost, which is helpful for the Trailblazers, 124-109. But the team that's hurting them right now is Dallas. I don't know. Dallas has kind of righted the ship. Do they play today? They will. They'll be in Chicago. So if there's one game you want to pay attention to this afternoon, it would be the 5 o'clock tip, Mavericks and Bulls. And that's a game that you want Chicago to win. So Portland, I mean, not only does Portland need to win a lot of games down the stretch in their final 8, but they're going to need help. They're going to need help from some of the other teams. So they need Sacramento, Phoenix, Dallas. Anytime you see them on the schedule, root against those teams. Root against Phoenix, Sacramento, and Dallas. And then we'll see if the Blazers. Yeah, it'd be nice if they can bounce back and beat the Knicks tomorrow. It makes that Sacramento loss a little bit better. But it could propel them to, some better things on this road trip. I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. But that's the plan. So this upcoming week, so obviously, the final 2 weeks of the regular season in the NBA, but I'll be down here next Saturday from 1 until 4, and I'll be down here from 3 until 6 on championship night on the 7th, which I think is the Monday. So what you should do is come down and join me for the Final Four here at Spirit Mountain Casino. We're going to do that. And it's going to be a lot of fun, and there's even going to be some March Mania drawings on that Monday. So, I mean, if you're looking for a place to hang out and watch the Final Four, I think that's the way to do it. And I know what a lot of guys do is they'll go to work and work like a half day on Monday championship day, and then they take off so they can watch the full game. So maybe that's what you should do. Work half a day or do a little bit of work and then make your transition down to Spirit Mountain Casino for the games. And I guess if I had to choose – I want Duke in the final. I want to see Cooper Flagg. That's why. I want to see Cooper Flagg on that stage. I want to see him perform. I just haven't been this excited about a college player coming in to the pros in a while. So, because I think he's going to be really good, and I'm excited to watch him. But it's the playmaking. I've mentioned this before, but my favorite type of players are guys who can do it on both ends. I like guys who have a lot of different tools in their bag, but I really like guys who can pass and have that feel. You know, what Jokic, that pass he threw the other night to Aaron Gordon on the no-look, like that was some on the move too. So he threw a no-look over-the-shoulder pass and hit Aaron Gordon, who was not stationary. He led him to the rim. So it was like a crossing route in the NFL, and Jokic did it no-look style. I mean, I got to give it up to him, man. Like, he's something else. And he's out there playing chess. So he anticipates things and sees things happen before it happens, and that's how he's able to catch defenders off guard, because they're totally surprised by what he's able to do. It's unbelievable. But yet he does it all the time. Let's see here. And I've got Rachel reaching out. It was pretty funny. She said, "You picked a doctor based on beauty?" And I just said, yeah, I didn't really know what else to go with. I just don't want a guy doctor. So I just went through the directory and picked the one that I thought suited me best. And she responded and said, it never occurred to me to pick a doctor based on his looks. Actually, I go to a female doctor also because women can relate to each other. Well, I just don't want to do doctor. So that's all. You know, I'm different. Some guys don't want a female examining them. I don't want a dude examining me. And if I'm going to be examined by someone, then at least hopefully it's someone, especially if they got to go into regions that you're not used to someone being in, I want someone that I'm comfortable with. That's all, you know. And how else am I supposed to know if they're a good doctor? I'll pick someone that I think looks pretty good, and then if I go there and they're not a good doctor, I know. But so far the choice has been pretty